This meeting of the Margate Planning Board is called to order. Please stand for the flag salute. Attention, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Okay.
Tom Collins,
Here.
Clem Wozleski, Mike Richmond.
Here.
Jim Galantino,
Here.
Margaret Gubernalti,
Here.
Mike Cristaldi, Craig Palmisano, David Carter, Despina Hess,
Here.
Remy Pelosi, Joe DiGirolamo, Rich Patterson.
Here. This meeting is being held in accordance with due public notice thereof and pursuant to the New Jersey State Sunshine Law. Notice of this meeting was advertised in the press, and a copy of same has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building. All applicants are hereby advised that should you receive board approval tonight, you must come forward and sign a form which informs you regarding the timing of receiving building permits and mercantile licenses. At the end of your case tonight, please see the board administrator to sign the two information sheets. I'd like to hear a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. I'd like to hear a motion for approval of decisions and resolutions number 40, 2017, Bruce Greenbaum, number 41, 2017, Deborah Scaller, number 42, 2017, J. Thomas Construction, LLC, number 43, 2017, Nelson and Lauren Verbit, number 44, 2017, Solomon Fine Homes.
I'll make a motion.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. There's a change in the order of cases tonight. Margate Burger has been postponed until the November meeting. The cases will be heard number 8 first, number 9 second, number 10 third, and number 7 will be heard fourth.
Just real quick on that Margate Burger one, if anyone's here for that, that's going to be November 30th in this room, same time, 6:30. There was an error with the tax information supplied to the applicant. I spoke to Mr. Balanson today. He's agreed to put it off and renotice and republish. It wasn't Mr. Balanson's fault, but he's going to, no, he doesn't want to piecemeal it and just renotice certain people. He's going to do the whole thing over again, so that's going to be November 30th. So if you're here for that, you'll get a new notice if you're within 200 feet, but it is going to be next month, November 30th.
Okay. So the first case is Gerald Green, 15 South Jasper Avenue, Block 111.01, Lot 5, in the S25 district to grant a C variance for side yard setbacks, combined side yard, and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. McLaren, please be sworn in.
Mr. McLaren, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Chairman, Board members. My report is dated October 24th. It's a relatively straightforward application for Gerald Green, 15 South Jasper Avenue. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the City of Margate in order to construct an addition onto a single-family home on South Jasper Avenue. The addition will enclose a second-floor open deck, which is located above a portion of the principal building. Front yard and side yard setbacks trigger variances. Page 1 and page 2 is the zoning information. Section 2 reveals the documents that I reviewed. The variances required are as follows. Front yard setback for the building, whereas 10.9 feet is the prevailing front yard setback, 6 feet is existing and proposed. Variance number 2, side yard setback to the building, whereas 5 feet is the minimum side yard setback and 2.8 feet is existing and proposed. Number 3, combined side yard setback to the building, whereas 14.8 feet is the minimum combined side yard setback and 13.2 feet is existing and proposed. Variance number 4 is the distance between detached garage and adjacent principal structure, whereas 5 feet is the minimum setback 6 feet exists today, and since the garage is being reconstructed and moved, 4.13 feet is proposed. Waivers requested are as follows. Checklist item 1A, copy of an area map showing all lots within 200 feet of the property. My comments are as follows. The front yard setback proposed is less than what is allowed and requires a variance. The vertical expansion of existing non-conforming setbacks triggers the required variance. Same thing for number 2 and number 3. Number 4, the distance between the adjacent principal structure and the proposed garage is a hardship not created by the property in question, as the proposed garage will still comply with the minimum setbacks for the property in question. The existing principal structure does not meet the minimum required setbacks for the side yard and rear yard. There will not be an increase in impervious coverage from existing conditions. 2 mature trees still exist and should be protected and saved if possible. The grass planting strip shall be maintained. The waiver requested may be granted without detriment, as the 200-foot map is included with my report. An increase in landscape coverage is suggested to reduce the existing nonconformity of lot coverage. The addition will be compliant with roof slope requirements. The remainder of the house remains with a flat roof, but the addition will comply with our roof pitch ordinance. Section number 6 indicates and provides direction on C1 and C2 criteria for variance relief. My conditions are listed B through I, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. McLarnon. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, Eric Goldstein on behalf of the applicant. Just by way of background, you may recall a couple things. Mr. Green was in for an actual full hearing last March and was granted a variance for a 3rd floor, which he decided not to go with. It was just too much work. Wanted to come back with something less obtrusive, and I think Mr. Weiss has designed a plan that's far less difficult for him to build than what he was approved for last year. Mr. Green's neighbor was also in last month, and you might recall Mr. Green came up and said, "I'll see you all this month." They were kind of working in conjunction, trying to get the hearings the same month. We just missed it by a little bit, but the neighboring house that was approved last month has since been demolished. So a couple of things I want to let you know. Number 1, and Pete brought this to my attention today, because the house is demolished, the setback variance is slightly less, increasing that existing nonconformity. It changes by about 1.6 foot, right, Pete? And Mr. Weiss will testify to that when he's sworn in. So that changes ever so slightly. And to the extent the board has questions regarding parking, which was a big issue last year, the only reason parking was an issue and is not now, we were putting 2 additional bedrooms on and needed an additional space. We're not increasing the bedroom count this year, so the parking count remains the same. Having said that, Mr. Weiss is here. I'm going to swear him in as an expert in the field of architecture. So, Pete, if you don't mind, Mr. Manos will swear in. I'll qualify.
Mr. Weiss, just quickly, your name and address for the record.
Peter Weiss, 101 North Washington Avenue, Margate.
And do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
The board's familiar with Mr. Weiss's credentials. To the extent they would like him to state them again, we will, but otherwise, we'd ask.
We accept his credentials.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. Mr. Weiss, you've been sworn. Why don't you walk us through the plan? Generally explain what we're doing this year, and then to the extent the board has questions about what we were approved for last year, we can certainly answer them.
Okay, the existing site is occupied by a 2-story building. It's actually a little bit under 2,000 square feet, so it's pretty modest. The living space is all on the 1st floor. The 2nd floor has 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. As mentioned, last year we came in for variances to add a 3rd floor, which would have had 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. Jerry since decided that's more than he really needed. So at this point, we're here asking to enclose an existing porch that exists on the 2nd floor, make it a sitting room off the existing master bedroom, which will effectively just make the bedroom larger. And that's really the gist of it.
Mr. Weiss, is the footprint of the property being expanded at all?
No.
And but for the need to simply enclose what's there now, we wouldn't be here for a variance, but the property line, unfortunately, is too close to the proposed construction, correct?
Yes.
And just explain to the board, for the record, how that existing nonconformity is going to change from an open area to a enclosed sitting area.
Well, right now, there's a solid wall, which is roughly 3 foot high, so basically, we're gonna extend that up, put a new roof over just the addition, so that'll now have a hip roof on it, sort of match, or then comply with the zoning requirements of having a pitched roof. The side yard at this point, I mean, the average for the building is about 2.8 feet. Where the addition is, it's really, because it steps in here a little bit, it's about 4.2 feet, so we're basically asking for 10 inches on the side. And the front is a function of, okay, the front setback is just a function of the existing building and extending it up. So overall, the addition's about 8 foot by 16, so it's relatively small.
And obviously, because the house already is too close to the property line, we're not moving the house over. So in your professional opinion, is there any detriment associated with granting of this variance? And would you say that the positives greatly outweigh the negatives? Mr. Green's going to be able to enclose that sitting area and he'll obviously change the front of the property, making it more beautiful for the other property owners along Jasper Avenue.
Yes.
Unless the board has any questions,
I just have
Mr.
one.
Green's here, sure.
On Roger's comment number 9, an increase in landscape coverage is suggested. Have you looked at that at all? Is there anything that can be done? I don't,
Mr. Green's here. He'd be sworn. He was here
Okay.
last week. He spoke in favor of the neighbor, so might as well speak now. Raise your hand, Mr. Mann, I'll swear you in.
Mr. Green, just your name and address real quick for the record.
Yes, Gerald Green, 15 South Jasper, Margate, New Jersey.
And do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, Jerry, the discussion is now landscaping. Is there anything we can do to increase landscaping to beautify the streetscape along Jasper?
Right. Well, I have very nice landscaping now, at least I think, probably more than anyone else on the block. But yeah, I will be adding more landscaping along the side of the house where my neighbor is, who was in last month. So
Okay.
that's all going to be added.
all right,
And I'm definitely keeping the trees. I encourage everyone on my street to add trees.
thank you.
Okay, sure.
So,
Excuse me, 1 minute.
Wait, Jerry.
You're saying
Collins
the
has some questions.
Ventnor Avenue side property, you're gonna put landscaping down that side?
Yes.
And how much landscape?
To the back of the house.
All the way down? By
Yeah.
how wide?
How about how wide? Oh, no, it's more than that. It's about, I'd say about 4 feet wide. There are timbers there right now, landscape timbers. And I'll be adding landscaping to that area. I'd say it's about 4 feet wide.
Okay, so Peter, would that eliminate a
No, I
landscape
think we're
variance?
talking about different things. You're talking about the Ventnor Avenue side, I think you're talking about, did you say Ventnor Avenue?
The Ventnor Avenue side where the house
You
is
said
torn
Ventnor, I
down?
was thinking Atlantic, okay, sorry.
And then does that eliminate the need for a landscape variance?
there is no variance. It's
There is no
it's non, it's
It's an
existing.
Non-conforming,
Yeah.
but will that bring us closer to what's
Well, of course
required?
it'll bring it closer. I mean,
By how much?
Well, what's being removed? Is the concrete on the one side being removed?
You know, if I may, yeah, there is some concrete being removed, but what I can do as well is on the Atlantic side, there's stone following the driveway, and I can remove the stone and put grass in there.
Plans indicate grass, right?
They do already?
Thank you.
Okay.
Did you
Wow.
have something, Roger? You-
I just want to confirm that the side yard setback for the expansion of the porch is actually 4.17 feet then, right?
4 foot 2 inches, yeah.
Right. I go by tenths. You architects go by inches.
Any other
4.16.
questions? I'm sorry. Any other questions from the board?
Yeah.
Mike?
Can you, Pete, can you explain the garage variance or?
The garage is not in great shape. It's got a flat roof. I guess it's leaked over the years, so it's got some damage on the inside. But rather than trying to patch it, we'd like to
Right.
put a new roof on it and at the same time move it, what ultimately is about 2 feet to the south, which will open up the space between the house and the garage a little bit, provide better access, easier access to the backyard. So at that point, we're about 4 feet from the neighbor's house, so the ordinance requires 5 feet for this little stretch here, where there's an overlap. So that's where the variance.
How far are you from the property line?
10 inches.
10 inches.
Yeah.
Mike, is that enough for your gutters and?
Eleven and a half?
The ordinance
That's why-
requires 0. The ordinance allows for 0.
No, but we have to allow for the,
What Mike was
Right.
saying is that the last time this came up, we agreed that we would keep it to 11 inches to provide proper drainage.
okay, well then move it an inch, okay?
1 inch of problem.
Right.
We got it. Thanks.
Okay.
And you might recall last month, we had the same issue with the neighbor because they're, okay.
Anything else from the board?
Eric, looks like they're tearing the house down next door.
They're done.
So, I mean, he's saving the house. He wants to live in the house. He doesn't want to tear it down, so he's saving the neighborhood.
Keeping a historic house, beautifying the streetscape along Jasper Avenue, good planning and development concepts by Pete. It's a great project.
Wow.
Mr. Weiss, once you move it an inch, what will that figure be to the neighboring dwelling?
4 foot 3 inches.
4.4.
Well, Roger had,
3/12
Roger
is
scaled it.
4.25.
I scaled it. My numbers are a little bit different than Roger's. I was coming up with 3'9" to the neighbor, 3'9" which I think is probably accurate.
I'm going by the survey.
Had a number on it?
I have a survey for next door. In this house, it says 3.3 feet to the property line. The survey for this property indicates 2.78, so I just added the 2 and
So
came
it's
up with the
possible
number.
this is off by a little bit. So that would be, what do we say, an inch? 3'3", 4.33, how's that?
Perfect.
No, it'd be
You said it was
4.21.
Wait a minute. You said it was 4 foot 2 inches,
Okay,
we're adding an inch.
4.25,
That-
I'm sorry.
4.25.
4.2 plus or minus,
4.25.
not split hairs.
Anything
With-
else from the board? Is anyone here from the public who would like to comment? Public portion is closed. Any other comments or questions from the board? Would you read the motion, please?
Sure, we need a motion for C variance relief for the following: front yard setback to the building of 6 feet where 10.9 feet is required, side yard setback to the building of 2.8 feet where 5 feet is required, combined side yard setback of 13.2 feet where 14.8 feet is required, and then the distance between the detached garage and the adjacent principal structure of 4.25 feet where 5 feet is required. Following conditions will apply. The applicant will increase landscaping along the Ventnor Avenue side of the property all the way back, approximately 4 feet wide. The garage, as shown on the plans presented, will be moved towards the house 1 inch, and all other conditions in Mr. McLaurin's report dated October 24, 2017, unless modified on the record tonight.
Leo, number 2 is 4.17 feet. 2.8 is to the house, 4.17 is to the porch.
Got you.
And the waiver,
And the following waivers from providing a copy of an area map showing all lots within 200 feet of the property. Thank you.
sweet.
I hear a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Tom? Mike?
Tom Collins,
I vote in favor of the application. I think it's a very de minimis impact on the neighborhood. I like that you're keeping the character of the house, beautiful Spanish tile. Hopefully you'll be able to save that. I don't see any negatives, especially with the house next door torn down and the other houses are already out in front. There is no blockage of light and air, so I vote yes.
Clem Wazeski,
It's very nice to see an older home preserved and enhanced rather than face the wrecking ball, which is what we usually see. Certainly, there's no detriment to the public good, and there's no impairment of the zoning intent or ordinance I vote to approve the application.
Rich Patterson.
For the same reasons as the two previous members, I vote to approve the application.
Mike Cristaldi.
I approve the application.
Jim Galantino.
Front yard, side yard, detached garage, I don't see any problem with those variances being, I'm okay. But yes,
Margaret Gubernalty.
I vote in favor of the applications for the same reasons previously stated by Mr. Collins and Mr. Wasilewski.
Mike Richmond.
I vote in favor of the application.
Application passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Next case is Suzanne Stein, 102 South Andover Avenue, Block 1.02, Lot 9, in the S30 District, to grant a C variance, building coverage, rear yard setback, possibly third floor habitable space, and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. McLaren?
Thank you, Board Chairman and Board members. My report is dated October 24th. In regard to application of Suzanne and Gary Stein, 102 South Andover Avenue, Block 1.02, Lot 9. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the City of Margate in order to construct a new home on the beach block of South Andover Avenue. The construction of the house requires several variances, including but not limited to building coverage, third floor deck, rear yard setback for the building, and third floor habitable floor area. The site currently contains a non-flood compliant residential structure. My zoning chart is attached, and let's go with variances required. Variance number 1, third floor deck. Whereas third floor decks are only permitted on waterfront or beachfront properties, and one is being proposed on this property which is neither beachfront nor waterfront. Rear yard setback for the building, whereas 12.5 feet is the required minimum setback and 8.5 feet is proposed. Building coverage, whereas 39.375% is the permitted maximum, and 41% is the proposed building coverage. I determined through my analysis that the third floor habitable floor area actually complies with the zoning ordinance, so that variance goes away. Waivers requested, copy of an area map showing all lots within 200 feet of the property. Waiver request number 2, copies of subdivision, site plan, or conditional use applications when applicable. My comments are as follows. Third floor decks are not yet permitted within the beach block, but the intent of the master plan is to permit third floor decks within beach block properties. The principal building does not meet the rear yard setback requirements as noted above in the variance request. The overall building coverage exceeds the allowable building coverage by 1.625%. If the building envelope complied with setbacks, i.e. the rear yard, it would comply with building coverage. The application indicated a variance request for third floor habitable area, but my calculation yield that it complies with allowable areas as indicated on the zoning chart. As for waivers, the cover sheet of the plans provides the area map required, so a waiver is technically not required. Again, in regard to waivers requested, the requirement for checklist item 1D is not applicable to this application. So a waiver is not requested, it's not applicable. I do want to point out the crawl space will be less than 12 inches with the proposed first floor elevation. It is suggested that the building be elevated 18 inches to allow for a 24 to 30 inch crawl space. Therefore, that would require a height variance, which would be a C variance. It's up to the applicant to request that now, which would be strongly encouraged.
Roger, I thought we had a minimum crawl space by code.
It's a design, it's not a variance. Crawl space is not a variance.
But they have to have, what is it, 18? You're on that committee. You have to have 24.
Right.
So you have to have it anyway. And I thought it didn't mandate a variance if it was caused by the, Jim? Okay. What's the answer? Yes? Okay.
Guess what?
I thought you needed 24 under the house anyway, and then you don't need a height variance.
we usually go to the BFE meeting if there's a case where we're going to elevate.
Jim, could you speak into the microphone?
We go to the BFE meeting with Roger and a few members to do that.
Right. Well, here, Roger's suggesting they do it, and I'm saying it's mandatory they do it, and they don't need a variance.
They're changing the measurement from where the first floor height is measured from. They need a variance.
Whatever, they're going to ask for it anyway, but I'm just clarifying it. But you have to go 24, that's not a suggestion.
Just to let the board members know, this in no way increases the floor heights
No,
from
it
floor
just
to
moves the
ceiling.
measurement point.
Doesn't affect that at all. It's just raising it up.
Yes.
We're not trying to squeeze more height in there.
No, no, no.
Not the case, okay.
No, we want space under the house that
Right.
you can easily get under, that's,
But we're not trying to kind of shoehorn that in to say,
Right.
this is our way of getting around that.
No.
Right.
It's going to be 30 maximum height.
Right.
From finished first floor to the roof
Are
pitch.
you amending to do that?
Yes, Mr. Collins, we are.
It's still, it's an additional C variance, but one C variance went away, so they have another one.
And just so the board knows, we did advertise for any and all others, so we're okay to go forward.
so you agree it'll be 24 inches underneath?
I do, Mr. Patterson. Yes.
Sorry, Roger, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I think we should iron out what your request would be, 32 feet? You want an additional 2 feet?
Oh,
Right now.
18 inches.
Just gonna,
We have a 1 foot crawl space, so
so if we need
He's
to
not
be,
sworn in.
foot.
oh, I'm sorry.
All right.
Miss Casey's correct. We probably should
Wanna
get it.
get to that?
Yeah.
Is this the only, just Mr. Lolio?
Mr. Lolio is present to testify, as is the property owner, Mrs. Stein, if the board has questions for her. But for right now, we'll start with Mr. Lolio.
Mr. Lawyer, just your name and business address for the record.
Robert Lolio, 299 White Horse Pike in Echo, New Jersey.
And do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
So with regard to our amendment of the application, Mr. Lolio, right now, the crawl space is how deep?
Crawl space is 1 foot to the underside of the joist. So we have,
So
the
you need
grade's
one more
around
foot.
10 and the finished floor is at 12. So if we went up a foot, that would give us a 2 foot crawl
Yes.
space.
So if we were going for the 24-inch crawl space, we would need a variance for height of 1 foot on top of what's presently allowed.
Yes.
Yes. We will amend to add that additional foot, Mr.
That would be the
McLaren.
minimum. If
I would suggest you go an extra 6 inches on that.
We don't want to be greedy again, so if you say that's your
That's not
suggestion.
being greedy, that's
fine.
being practical.
Okay, then we would go for the 18-inch on the height, which still keeps us as a C variance.
Oh,
Finished floor would be at 13.5.
Right.
Okay? So, for Mr. Manos' purpose, to the extent the board sees fit to vote on this in the affirmative, it would be 18 inches above what we've currently submitted for plans, keeping it still as a C variance because it's less than 10% of the overall height.
Correct.
And then the crawl space will be 2.5 feet.
That's correct, and we're not adding any additional floor-to-ceiling heights as well.
The reason being, we don't want to see you have to excavate the lot
Sure.
to make you comply with the 24-inch. I mean, higher is better for flood.
If we're starting at the ground level and then we dig down, obviously it's going to create more of a water problem in the crawl space, so that's fine, Mr. McLaren.
Okay.
Unless the board has any further questions, we'll proceed with the application.
are you done, Roger? I interrupted you before. We were at recommendations.
Right, I think I'm pretty good right now. That was the big one.
All right, thank you, Mr. Collins. So, Mr. Lolio is a licensed architect. He has testified before this board on many occasions. I would ask that we accept his
We
credentials.
accept his credentials.
Thanks. All right. Mr. Lolio, prior to getting started here, I just want to give the board a little bit of background. You have it all in your packages there. Steins recently bought this property and kind of thought about how they could best make use of it. Retaining the structure, Mr. Wozleski said, is always very important. They gave it a lot of thought as well. The problem we have with this structure is the side yard setback on the one side is 2.8 feet. The rear yard is 4.9 feet. There wasn't a lot we could do with that, which wouldn't require more variances than we're asking for this evening. So the idea was, the house is really in kind of fair shape, tear it down and start from scratch. With regard to the third floor deck variance, we are hoping by now that the ordinance will have passed. Obviously, it hasn't, so with regard to the direction that the board's going and the city's going with the master plan and the new zoning law change, it's our request that that be considered when Mr. Lolo gives his testimony as to the justifications for that grant, as well as the current kind of odd configuration of the house. All of you have a survey in front of you, and you can see how the house sits on the lot in kind of an odd way, which it won't any longer. We're going to have compliant setbacks from side to side. We didn't want to come any closer to Andover Avenue, and the only thing to kind of squeeze that in was to go into the rear yard a little bit, but it'll be a 4-foot increase in open space from what's there now, rear yard to rear yard, and obviously it's going to be a great increase from side yard setback, side to side from what's there now. So having said that, Mr. Lolo, if you would please walk us through the house that you've designed, the variances that are necessary one by one, and why don't we start with the third floor deck, just because you can describe what you've designed there and then how that fits into the overall master plan with the home being on the beach block on Andover.
The intent of the design was to create an upside-down house where the bedroom levels are on the first floor and the main living space is on the second floor to capture the views. And the client decided to create a large porch off the kitchen, dining, living area in the front to have that nice outdoor living space and capture the views. And the difference between the averages, between the average porch and average building was only 1.65 feet. So that's, to get a substantial, a decent-sized porch, that's why the house kind of crept back towards the rear yard, because there was only a very small difference in the averages, which came up unfavorable for us.
And Mr. Lolo, when you're talking about these averages and the design of the porches, obviously we've taken into consideration something that we're all burdened by right now, which is the new dune construction, correct?
Right.
And it was your idea that to the extent the views and vistas from the house were to be maximized, doing the upside-down house and putting the porches and decks where they are, give the property owner the best chance of having good views, knowing that from that level, they're still going to have some potential substantial blockage based on the dunes and the fences that were constructed above, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt you, but continue,
No
please.
problem. So the whole house was designed around this, getting the living space up and having a nice porch out on Andover, to enjoy the street and enjoy that outdoor living. And then also the third floor deck became part of that off the master suite, just to get another additional deck. And since it's on the beach block and it's the intent to have that permitted on beach block, we decided to design it that way. So the rear yard kind of came because of the average setback in the front yard, and we didn't want to encroach on Andover any more than the averages permitted. So that's why we decided to go towards the rear. And then, any other variances?
Well, as the house exists now, you're aware, aren't you, that the side closest to Atlantic Avenue is just 2.8 feet from the property line, correct?
Correct.
And when the presumed design of the house, assuming the board grants tonight, is approved, the
Minimum is 8 feet.
you're gaining 5+ feet on that side to the neighbor closest to Atlantic, correct?
Correct.
And in the rear yard, the neighbor who is directly behind the house is gaining an additional 4 feet of open space to the extent the board were to grant this application, correct?
Correct. It's going from 4.9 to 8.5 feet.
And in your opinion, as a professional licensed architect in the state of New Jersey, is that design a marked increase to benefit all the neighbors, as well as the city of Margate and the people who enjoy the vistas on the beach block? Does that benefit greatly outweigh any detriments that could be associated therewith?
Yes.
Now let's talk about the height, because we've applied for everything but the height, but we've also applied for any and all other variances. As you heard the board discuss earlier, it's their goal to achieve a crawl space where we don't have to excavate out to get 24 inches of depth from the bottom of the first floor to the dirt, correct?
Correct.
And without excavating that out, the only way to increase that crawl space height would be to increase the overall structure height, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And as a professional architect, do you see any problem associated with raising the whole entire structure up to give more crawl space underneath?
No, it's a benefit to the higher the better, so.
Okay. And in the event you were to have design the house to be built closer to Andover, obviously you would have eliminated a lot of what would be the rear yard setback, but then we'd be closer to the street, not taking advantage of the views that we're going to get by pushing it back a little bit on the second and third floor decks, correct?
Correct.
And do you see any negatives
Could
associated?
you, wait a
I'm
minute,
sorry.
could you explain that again? Are you saying you have room to move the house forward?
No, we don't, but the idea, you're correct. So the idea was, rather than apply for a front yard setback variance, which would skew the front yards of all the other homes, which I know is a big concern, as you go from one to the next, you're now changing the averages entirely. We're leaving the front yard as by right and pushing it back a little bit towards the house that would be on Argyle, the rear of that house, but increasing the distance between that house and the structure from what it is now. So we didn't have room to move it forward, Mr. Patterson. We didn't want to play around with that front yard setback, knowing how crucial that is to the board. Almost on every planning memo where front yard setback variance is requested, Mr. McLaurin's comments correctly are that as you move back one, you move back the next, and then you're almost out at 5 feet at that point. So that's a long way of saying we're not in it. We don't have any room in the front.
Eric, I think you already said it, but it's an improvement, though, still from what it was, correct?
Oh, correct. So right now, Ms. Hess, we're talking about the rear yard being 4.9 feet from the property line. This is going to be 8.5 feet from the property line, giving, more room in the back and to more squared off design as well.
The rear yard next door to the property, to the ocean side, is approximately 14 feet 4 inches.
Not just next door, all the way except the beach house.
And the one next to that towards the ocean is also 14 feet from the rear property line. The two houses closer to the beach, which would be 104 and 106, are both 14 feet from the rear property line. We're asking for 12, is 12 and a half feet for the standard here. And you want to give us, you want to go 8 feet.
Correct.
You're asking for 6 feet.
No,
I mean,
4 feet.
4 feet.
4 feet, I'm sorry.
Correct.
You're asking for 4 feet off the rear property line.
What we do pick up, however, by doing it this way, is a fairly additional, I would say, substantial front yard landscaped area where 60 is required. We're almost at 70 for adding the additional landscaping on the front of the property along Andover.
I just wanted to point out too that the average porch was 8.7 and the average building was 10.35. So that only leaves us 1.65 feet for a porch. So they wanted a large front porch, so that's why the building kind of stepped back to get an 8-foot deep porch on the front.
You're right there with the prevailing setbacks. You're right there for both.
Right.
The
But the
building and
difference
the
between the
porch.
two doesn't leave us enough room for a decent-sized porch. So the building,
You can make the house smaller. Right?
That's always the case.
Well, that goes to your coverage too. I mean, we've had this before. It's only 1%. Well, then if it's only 1%, make the house smaller. It's a bare lot. You started from scratch and you didn't know what the limit of what you can put there, and then you go ahead and draw it too big,
it's a difference of around 50 square feet.
which is minimal.
Right.
So take it off the house. That's my point, is it's not only 1% for us, it's only 1% for you.
Something to consider.
Rich, are you saying take off that 1% and add it to the rear yard setback?
I'm addressing this separately from the setback issue. It may help the setback issue, but what I'm saying is, with a blank canvas and you know what your square footage is, how could you possibly go 1% over?
Makes sense.
And if it's a minimal amount, we don't give in on a minimum amount, just make the house 1% smaller.
That's right. May we just have a moment to caucus?
Oh,
Mr.
absolutely.
Patterson?
Absolutely.
Not the same.
Rich, it looks like it's only 52 feet. Square feet is going to take off. So it's a closet.
I don't know what the footage is. I'm saying it's minimal and should come off the house.
Yeah.
As usual, comments very well taken. Property owners here listening and, you know, obviously not having done this before. We do believe we can take out of the rear of the property 1.8 feet, which will reduce the, it'll eliminate the coverage variance and will give an additional almost 2 feet to the rear yard. So now instead of 8 feet, it would be 6.2 feet. I'm sorry, 10.2 feet. And there'd be
Wait a
no.
minute, it'll be, start again.
All right. Right now, we're asking for 8-foot rear yard setback. We'd be giving an adjustment,
1.67 would be 1 foot 8 inches. That would put us under the building coverage.
so that would eliminate the coverage variance. We would still need a rear yard setback variance, although at that point, it's,
But you're changing that 8.5 to almost 10.
10.17.
Yeah,
yeah,
so from 12.5 to 10.17 is what you're requesting.
that's correct. No more coverage. That will also increase landscape area, so we're already at the number for landscape area anyway, 35.
And you still have the deck that you want in the front of the house?
Yeah, well, yes, that's correct.
I don't want to change the architecture of the house, because I do like it. The neighbor was concerned about view down. Is there any chance you could put open rails on the front decks? I don't want to change your architecture.
Which
but you're-
neighbor?
The neighbor towards Atlantic Avenue. Corner.
I show a cable rail system, so it's very, very light and
I'm looking at the siding. Yeah.
if I'm
The
looking at
front
the
deck.
property, which property?
The front deck, the one going towards,
It's partial, that side's partially covered?
that would be the one that would block their view.
Okay.
If you want to do the open rail there or glass. I mean, you're a good architect, so you can make it look good.
Okay, that's fine.
So we're reasonable people. Ms.
Yeah.
Steins here and said, that's fine. Is
I
it-
mean, your neighbor will get along a lot better. Okay.
So that's an acceptable condition, certainly, Mr. Crisaldi. Again, if the board sees fit to grant as a condition of approval, open rails from 100 South to 102 so they could see through. Front yard setbacks remain the same. Rear yard goes to the change as proposed by Mr. Lolio, and then the coverage variance goes away in its entirety. So we'd be talking about rear yard height and
Third floor deck.
third floor deck. That's it. But unless the board has any questions or wants to further discuss, we're okay to rest as is.
And the exact number on the rear yard, we said 10.17 feet?
10.17.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Is there anyone here from the public who would like to comment? Public portion is closed.
I just want to make a note, and I discussed this matter with Nick Talvacchia, an attorney, had called me, asked to have the plans sent over to him for one of his clients to review. His client reviewed and said he had no problem. I know it's not indicative of any kind of evidence that would be presented, but just letting you know, I did talk to Nick. His client reviewed and said he had no issues.
Does that client live anywhere near this property?
He does. He lives on Argyle on the back.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Not directly behind, one house over.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a good question, because he could live over here. He wouldn't have any questions.
Anything else from the board?
Eric, I think Roger suggested that the waivers you don't need, are you still requesting those? The 2 waivers he noted in his report?
No. We're-
You.
Oh, my
Clarence.
turn?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're up.
We need a motion for C variance relief for the following: to permit third floor decks where they are not permitted, a rear yard setback of 10.17 feet where 12.5 feet is required, and a height variance to permit a principal building height of 31.5 feet where 30 feet is permitted. with the following conditions. The crawl space will be increased to 2.5 feet. And there will be open rails from 100 South Andover to the subject property so that the neighbors' views aren't obstructed. And all other conditions set forth in Mr. McLaren's report of October 24th, 2017, unless modified on the record tonight.
I hear a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Vinkie? Mike?
Tom Collins?
Very interesting case. Older home, beautiful neighborhood. If this home was saved and elevated, we would have much, much less air, light, and open space around the property. What you did, what you're proposing, I think is very admirable. It's a lot of expense, but it's going to increase the, I see no negative impacts to the neighborhood. You're increasing the rear yard setbacks, you're increasing the side yard setbacks over what's existing that I saw today. I think it's going to be a asset to the neighborhood. I think your neighbors will be happy, and I think you'll be very happy, so I vote in favor.
Clem Wasleski?
My concerns going in have been pretty much addressed, mostly that small overage on coverage, which was so easily solved. I'm still not totally comfortable with the rear yard, but it's somewhat a function of a very shallow lot. Our forefathers weren't very generous when they gave us 62.5-foot lots. But overall, I think it's acceptable. I vote to approve the application.
Rich Patterson?
I commend the applicant for being pliable in this area. I too still have a problem with the rear yard setback, but I absolutely understand on a beach block getting a better shot at a view from the front. And by cutting it back from, or increasing it from 8.5 to 10, I think will make a difference. So I approve the application.
Mike Cristaldi?
I also approve the application. I think you came around to our way a little bit. I'm happier for the neighbors and everything else. The rear yard, there's not much back there you can do with anyhow, so I approve.
Jim Galantino?
Here, no, I'm just kidding you. Third floor deck, rear yard deck, and the height variance, I don't see a problem with that. I think it'll be a nice house when it's built. I think Mr. Lolio is going to build it, or design a nice house. I approve.
Margaret Gubernalty?
I thank you for the concessions you made. I mean, it is a 40 by 62.5-foot lot. We're improving the side yard. The rear yard certainly is a little short, but I think it's fine. I think it's a great addition to the neighborhood, and I approve the application.
Mike Richmond?
I'm glad you eliminated the coverage variance, and that also helped out with the rear yard setback, and we're going in the direction of allowing third floor decks in the beach block anyway, so I'm going to approve it.
Application passes 7-0.
Next case is Evans Grove, New Jersey LLC, 124 North Madison Avenue, Block 330, Lot 43.01, in the MF District to grant a C variance for front yard setback, minimum lot area, front yard to building, front yard to porch, and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. McLaren?
Thank you, Board Chairman, Board members. My report is in regard to Evans Grove, New Jersey LLC, 126 North Madison Avenue. It's in the MF zone. There's an interesting caveat in our ordinance that if you're in the MF zone and you're developing a single-family house, you move the zoning chart over to the left. So the most comparable zoning chart is representative of the S30 zone. So the zoning analysis was based on that. And the three variances that were identified are as follows. Front yard setback for the building for Monmouth Avenue, whereas 7.3 feet is the prevailing setback, or 5 feet is the minimum, and 7 feet is the proposed setback. The front yard setback to the building along Madison Avenue, whereas 21.2 feet is the prevailing setback, and 15 feet is the proposed setback. Variance number 3 is the front yard setback to the porch or deck along Madison Avenue, whereas 16.8 feet is the prevailing setback and 8 feet is proposed. No waivers have been requested. My comments are as follows. The front yard setback along Monmouth Avenue still complies with the minimum required, but still requires a variance for not complying with the prevailing setbacks. The front yard setback for Madison Avenue requires a variance as it does not comply with the prevailing setback calculated. The front yard porch deck setback requires a variance as they do not comply with the prevailing setback for Madison Avenue. The lot was previously subdivided and the addresses shown need to be confirmed as two different addresses are shown. And I would also conclude that the lot and block, or the lot numbers ought to comply with the tax assessor. Do they?
They do, yes, Mr. McLaren, they do now, and I've got a fully indexed copy of the subdivision plan that I'm going to give to you when we get started that have this as lot 43.01. I've confirmed that with Mr. Mangum. We just have to get the address, start building something. Otherwise, it's just an address in the air. The numbers will be on the house when it's
Correct.
built. This will be 126 North Madison.
Okay. The lot area complies with either the S25 or S30 single-family zones as no variance is required as per Schedule B1. There appears to be an existing overhead utility line, but actually that was removed when the house next door was elevated, so that comment goes away. As you can see in Section 6 for recommendations, all variances are conditioned on C1 and C2 criteria as outlined below. There is no hardship variances for this application. And recommendations, item number D, place the proposed street trees within a grass planting strip. That's a recommendation based on our city's arborist. Submit a copy of the filed subdivision, which you propose to do. And you address item number F. House numbers in Arabic numerals with a minimum 3-inch height will be attached to the building. Lot grading shall be from rear to the street on both sides. And the other comments are standard comments, which I think you've read already.
Yes, we
That
agree,
concludes my
Mr.
report.
Larned. For the record, Eric Goldstein on behalf of the applicant. With me this evening again is Mr. Lolio. He's previously been sworn but not a part of this application. So, Mr. Manos, do you want to have him sworn in again?
Sure. Just for the record, your name and address again.
Robert Bullitt, 299 White Horse Pike, Acco, New Jersey.
And do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, as we get started, I do have a copy of the actual final filed subdivision plan, which I'm going to pass around for one important reason. The variances that are necessary regarding the front yard on Madison Avenue really do provide a better alternative than if this house were built to the setbacks. As if it were, you can see on the map, you basically have a boxcar in the rear corner of the property, which we think looked a little bit goofy. We're not asking to come out to 5 feet, which is the minimum. The applicants asked Mr. Lolio to design a house, which is actually currently built at 26 North Madison. Same builder, same architect, same size lot. It is exactly the same house. So to the extent anyone has a question as to what this would look like, that is the same house as this. I'd like you all to take a look at the subdivision map because it really does show how, if we were to build without the variances, you'd have a thin boxcar in the rear of the property, which I think would decrease the streetscape to a great extent. But in any event, Mr. Lolio is still going to put his case on. That's just something I think is important to consider as we go through our justifications for the front yard variances. Additionally, at some point, we did consider going in and trying to purchase the house next door, doing more units there. This is a single-family house in a multifamily zone, decreasing the density of the overall development as a whole, we think adds great value to this area where everything over here is duplex or multifamily. So having said that, I'm going to hand this to Mr. Galantino to.
And I'll just call it A1 subdivision plan.
Correct.
For the record.
And for
When
the
did-
record,
when was that subdivision done?
it was finalized September of this year. What?
Said my name.
No. It was actually recorded, Mr. Patterson, September 12th.
And this was a by right subdivision?
It was.
Did this come before the committee?
Yes,
Yes, okay. You were sick that day.
September.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Lolio has been sworn. His credentials have already been accepted by the board as an expert in the field of architecture. We would ask that you continue to accept him. And Mr. Lolio, I'm going to hand this down to Mr. Galantino. If you could walk us through the plan, explaining specifically what this zoning alternative represents by way of the variance versus what we could have done by right.
So the house is designed as a two-story over parking. So we created 4 parking spots on site, 2 in the garage and 2 in the driveway off of Madison. And there's an exterior stair that leads up to the first floor, living level, which becomes the main living quarters, kitchen, dining, living, and then there's a small bedroom / could be an office on that level as well. And then the second floor is the bedroom level with a deck out front. So if I go back to the site plan, as Eric mentioned, the front yard average is 7 feet proposed and 7.3 feet was the prevailing setback. And then on Madison Avenue, 21.2 feet, which is a substantial setback for this lot since the lot's only 50 foot deep in that direction. It didn't leave you much. It left you a house that's set back pretty far, and it would be a lot. Since it's on a corner, I think the presence should be shifted towards the front, just to give it a greater presence on the corner lot.
Mr. Lolio, Mr. McLaren correctly stated in his report, the hardship doesn't exist because we created this subdivision, but in your opinion, by having we're using the flexible C criteria, the house designed to come closer to the corner, does that present a better zoning alternative than putting it in the opposite rear corner, tucked back and a thinner structure?
I believe so. It would be a more narrow, taller house. I think it would look awkward on this site if we tried to conform to the setbacks.
And by bringing the house closer to the corner, you're still pretty substantially back from both Monmouth and from Madison. We don't block any sight lines. There's no problem with people not being able to see around if they're coming down either of those streets, correct?
We conform within the site triangle.
And the minimum setback being 5 feet, we're still pretty substantially back on all of the setbacks, correct?
Correct.
All right.
Our porch is at 8, and the building is 15 feet back.
Okay. I'm sorry, continue.
I think that covers all the variances. It's the 2 front yards.
In your
the
professional
building.
opinion, do the variances we're requesting and the way you've designed the property, are the benefits outweigh the detriment?
I believe so.
Do you see any detriments at all associated with the design of the property being further towards each of the corners?
No, I do not.
Okay. The subdivision plan, I don't know, if someone has this being passed around, but to the extent anyone has questions for the builder, they're here, they can discuss what they've built literally 1 block away at 126 North Madison, 26 North Madison, which...
Is that house coming down next door, or is that staying there?
It is likely going to stay, and I know that the applicants have had discussions. They've actually become quite friendly with the neighbor. We do have some testimony to the extent the board wants to hear it, that she couldn't be here tonight, but that she doesn't have any objection That's really the person it affects most. Now, well, full disclosure, she was the owner of the property who subdivided it off and sold it over to the developers, but she did so knowing they were coming in for the variance, knowing they were going to build this structure. And Mr. Salecchia, who's here, sat down and went through the plans with Miss Hausler, is it? Yeah. And discussed with her what was going to be built, at which time she said she didn't have an objection. So what she basically did was cuts the lot in half, approves what they're going to build before agreeing to sign off on the subdivision. Once she was satisfied, signs off on the subdivision, they submit plans to her, she doesn't object, and now we're here before the board. So,
I just wanted to add that if we went to the average building setback with the rear yard setback, it would only leave us 20 feet for the depth of the house from Madison. If we conformed with the average prevailing setback.
Is that a problem? If they
explain the
conform
size
with
of
the
house.
setbacks, they'd have a 20-foot wide house.
And how much parking is being proposed here? This is important, especially in this area of town.
We have 4 spots proposed.
Right now, there are none. How many are required?
I believe 3.
So you're getting
Three.
one additional off-street parking space when this area of town obviously gets busy, certainly in the summer, it's close to all the restaurants. So do you see that as a marked increase in a benefit to this street versus what's there now?
I do.
Right, but you can't park there, it's just grass, so we'd have to pave over and turn it into the municipal. No, it's been a vacant lot as long as the current property owner can remember, going back to, I think, the 40s.
Well, it's not a vacant lot, it was one lot with a house on it.
There's one lot with a house, right, but this
Right.
area has always been
Right.
the yard of that
Right.
house.
Eric, wouldn't you say that most of the front yard setbacks that this property is being compared to are at least twice the depth?
Correct, because we're on the corner going this way, not this way.
Correct.
Yes, Mr. McLaren, I concur. So,
And how many bedrooms is this? 5?
It's 5, yes.
5.
So there's no third floor?
It is.
No third floor, it's 2 stories, 5 bedrooms.
Roger, I have a question for you. If this wasn't on the corner, would we need any of these variances?
You would need the front yard setback for Monmouth Avenue, which would be de minimis. I mean, it's less than 4 inches.
That would be it?
That would be it.
Everything else is just because it's on the corner,
Yes.
which creates 2 front. Okay. Thank you.
You done? Eric?
Unless the board has any further questions.
That's my line.
And we're still here to.
Right. Does the
Yes,
board have any questions? Is there anyone here from the public that would like to comment? Please come forward, state your name, and be sworn in.
Mark Trapani.
You're right. I'm sorry, Mark.
Trapani.
Can you spell that?
Trapani.
Address?
9606 Monmouth Avenue. Next door.
And do you swear or affirm the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Just have a couple questions and concerns about what's going on with the property.
Could you speak into the microphone, please?
I just have a couple questions and concerns. Was the subdivision already approved?
Yes.
Okay. So it went from multifamily to single. That's all I wanted to make sure that I
Yes.
cleared that up. Even though the lot size was undersized?
It
It's
was.
a single family.
So, okay, so it wasn't.
They can't build a multifamily unit.
Okay, my main concern is that I live next door, and you, from Margate, know that's one of the lowest areas on the island, and flooding is a major issue there. So I just want to be assured that my property won't be compromised by this development. I kind of would like assurance in writing, but I'm very concerned about that.
Well, the building codes mandate that drainage be away from neighboring properties towards the street. So it's not a planning board matter, but just by building codes alone, it has to drain away from your property towards Monmouth, not towards your property.
I understand that. I have been told that in the past, and I've got burned from the property that was built behind me was supposed to run towards Madison, but it's so long, it also runs onto my property. I'm worried that this may happen because it is such a low-lying area. I'd like,
As a condition of approval, in my report, I require them to grade it towards the street on both sides. So it'll
And if
be
it
graded
doesn't
away
work
from
that
your
way, then
property.
you have an action against them with the city. So it is required that they not drain to your property.
okay, that's all.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions or comments from the public? Public portion is closed. Any other comments or questions from the board? Leo, would you read the motion, please?
Sure. Yeah, and Eric, you're okay with all the comments, recommendations in Roger's report?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so we need a motion for C variance relief for the following. Front yard setback on Monmouth Avenue to the building of 7 feet where 7.3 feet is the required prevailing setback. Front yard setback along Madison Avenue to the building of 15 feet where 21.2 feet is the prevailing required setback. A front yard setback along Madison Avenue to the porch/deck of 8 feet where 16.8 feet is the prevailing setback. And the conditions would be all those set forth in Mr. McLaren's report of October 25th, 2017, unless addressed or modified on the record tonight.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Tom Collins.
Very unusual case. Well, it is. It's a corner property. It's a inconsistently shaped lot compared to the pattern of the neighborhood, which puts a hardship on the owner for having that lot. Highest and best use for flood, for the Margate, for everything, I think is being met here. We're putting nice stacked parking, 2 deep only, getting 4 spaces. You're doing a nice design. We're not putting too much bulk and mass into the neighborhood. And I think that the trend that you're setting in that area with building is going to continue, and I think it's going to really improve the neighborhood. So I see no negative impacts. Everything I see is positive, and I vote in favor.
Clem Wasleski.
Regardless of the constraints put on this site by the fact that it is a corner lot, I think the way the project has been planned is very appropriate for the situation and the conditions. I think it'd be a positive addition to the neighborhood with little or no negative effect. I vote to approve the application.
Rich Patterson.
I feel the setback requirements along Madison Avenue are unfair to the applicant because of the depth of the lots that created the average setback. I think that, as the architect explained, it makes it almost impossible to build a house on that lot. I don't see any negative to this. I see positives in that we have a single-family home here where multifamily structure could have been built on the 2 lots. I think this is this helps the neighborhood. I vote yes.
Mike Cristaldi.
In a corner lot, you're penalized. I live in the Parkway and I'm an S25. I don't know how that ended up in S40, which really jammed you in a little bit more. I think you did a good job of trying to put that together to work there, so the parking and everything, I vote yes on the approval.
Jim Galantino.
Well, look, you got a property, it's 4.3 at the highest grade elevation on there. So, I mean, they flooded during Sandy. They had to have 4 feet of water in their house. So, I mean, now you're seeing a house that's going to be elevation 13, 14?
13, I think.
That's almost 9 feet higher than it was existing. So, just for that alone is why I would vote yes. For the 2 front yard setbacks, I don't see a problem with that. I vote yes.
Margaret Gubernalty.
I see this project as a positive to the neighborhood. I agree with the other board members as to the light of the fact that it is on a corner property, otherwise it would be less than a 4-inch requirement variance. I like the fact that it decreases the density in the neighborhood as well, and I vote in favor of the application.
Mike Richmond?
I also agree that being a corner property does create a hardship for the property owners, and I like the idea of adding the extra parking spot, especially in that neighborhood, and I'm going to approve it.
Application passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Final case is Cedar Townhomes, 100 North Madison Avenue. Yes.
Mr. Collins and Mr. Galantino cannot participate in this because of D variance.
We expect you to wait in the audience while we hear this case. Good
Good
night.
night, Tom.
See you later.
Final case is Cedar Townhomes, 100 North Madison Avenue, Block 331, Lot 24, in the MF District, to grant subdivision, site plan, D variance for density, C variances for lot area, building coverage, front yard, 2 side yards, rear yard, height, parking, and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. McLarnon?
Thank you, Board Chairman, Board members. My report is dated October 23rd in regard to Cedar Townhomes, 100 North Monroe Avenue, locally known as the Seven Sisters. Background: the applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the City of Margate in order to partially demolish an elevated structure which is being deemed structurally deficient or equivalent, reconstruct the same on existing new foundation, and subdivide a portion of the lot and create a new lot. The building had received prior approvals for the lift, but the damage to the structure that is elevated is too significant to remain as a straight lift. The reconstruction triggers several variances, including a D variance for density, numerous C variances, minor site plan approval, and minor subdivision approval. You'll see 2 zoning charts. One is for the main lot to remain, and the other one is a portion of that lot to be subdivided. I'll go to the portion of lot to be subdivided, which is proposed lot 24.01, which have to be confirmed by the tax assessor's office. They need 2 variances for that. One would be lot area and lot width. It's also my understanding that this lot is possibly going to be consolidated with the lot next door to the property on Winchester Avenue. So let's go through the variances for the remaining lot. Page 5 of 8, Section 3, variances required for proposed lot 24. Lot area, whereas 4,400 square feet is a minimum required and 3,125 square feet exists, and 2,706.25 square feet is proposed for proposed lot 24, which is the remaining lot. Front yard setback to the porch and deck along Monroe Avenue, whereas the prevailing setback of 23.29 feet, or 5 feet, is a required minimum setback for any residential zone, and the proposed deck does not meet the setback. It's actually an encroachment. Encroachment license would be required to permit this encroachment. The planning board can only grant a variance to the property line. I recommend that it's conditioned on the encroachment license being obtained. They did include the previous encroachment license for the prior or the current situation. That would need to be updated. Front yard setback to the building from Monroe Avenue, whereas prevailing setback of 29.21 feet, where 5 feet is a required minimum setback for any residential zone, and 1.42 feet exists and is also the proposed setback. Again, it's to the foundation, which is to remain. Rear yard setback, whereas the minimum setback for the MF zone for a rear yard setback is 20 feet and 1.9 feet is proposed. The proposed subdivision makes the former side yard a rear yard, because it's now not a corner lot any longer. Side yard setback on the left, whereas the minimum setback for the MF zone is 8 feet and the proposed minimum setback is 0.2 feet. The proposed subdivision creates a side yard setback, which was once a front yard. side yard setback for the right, whereas the minimum setback for the MF zone is 8 feet, and the proposed minimum setback is 6.4 feet. Front yard steps, whereas the minimum setback is 2 feet and 0 feet is proposed. Actually, there is an encroachment, so an encroachment license is required to permit this encroachment. Variance number 8, building coverage, whereas the minimum building coverage for the MF zone is 45% and 57.45 feet is 45% is proposed, based on Schedule B1. Item number 9, variance number 9, front yard landscaped area, whereas the minimum required front yard landscaped area vegetative surface is 60% for the MF zone, and the proposed coverage is 8% based on the required front yard setbacks that create the front yard, Schedule B-1. Variance number 10, third floor decks, whereas third floor decks are not permitted at this location or in this zone, and 1 is proposed. Variance number 11, parking, whereas 10 spaces are required based on townhouse designation for a total of 8 bedrooms times 2.3 spaces per 2-bedroom unit, which is 9.92 spaces or 10 spaces, and 2 spaces are proposed. Keep in mind, 0 spaces for off-street parking exists today for 7 units. Variance number 12, density, whereas the MF zone permits 1 unit for each 2,200 square feet of available land area, and 7 units exist and 4 units are proposed, which would both exceed the permitted number of units. However, the density decreases with the proposed application. And again, the variance is proposed for lot area for lot 2401, whereas 4,400 square feet is a minimum required and 3,125 square feet exists, and 418.75 square feet is proposed for lot 24.01. Variance number 2 is lot width, whereas 40 feet is a minimum lot width and 25 feet is proposed. Waivers requested, none are requested. Several are required as per the checklist, which the applicant should address. My comments are as follows. The lot area is an existing nonconformity. However, the reduction in size of the main lot increases the nonconformity. The front yard deck setback encroaches into the right-of-way and needs both a variance and an encroachment license. The planning board's jurisdiction is the setback condition on obtaining an encroachment license. The front yard setback for the building is an existing nonconformity. However, the vertical expansion requires a variance. The rear yard for the building is created by the proposed subdivision, which today is a side yard which does not conform. The minimum side yard, which is once a front yard, requires a setback variance. The other side yard, the right side, is an existing nonconformity but requires a variance for expansion of a nonconforming situation. The front yard steps require a variance for not meeting the front yard setback requirement. The steps are for entry into the foyer, not the first floor, which would be permitted. The steps also encroach and require an encroachment license. Skipping down, instead of reading through all these redundancy, I want to skip down to number 12. The applicant requires a D variance for density for allowing 4 times the number of permitted units, which is a reduction from 7 units. Even with the reduction of land, there is a reduction in density. Testimony from a licensed professional New Jersey planner is required for this D variance. Proposed lot 24.01 creates a grossly undersized lot that is unbuildable and is not recommended. The required lot area is 4,400 square feet and 418.75 square feet is proposed, or less than 10% of the required minimum lot size. Basically, you are creating an unbuildable lot. Section 6 of the recommendations, and it outlines the D variances and the hardship and the C1 and C2 criteria, which the applicant is burdened to provide proof that his application meets these. And at this point in time, I think we ought to open it to the applicant to discuss the application.
Good evening, Board. Daniel J. Gallagher on behalf of Cedar Townhomes. Before I start, I'd like to have Mr. Dothay and Mr. Andy Schaefer qualified. They both testified before the boards, unless the board would like to hear their credentials.
No, we accept his credentials.
Before we start, I think a brief history of the property is warranted. You can see, if anybody's familiar with the property, it was substantially damaged as a result of Hurricane Sandy. And previously, the property owners came in and received approval to raise the existing structure up. With that, they received a revocable license that was crafted by Scott Abbott. During that time and the time from receiving the insurance proceeds to do the repairs, it was noted that a lot of the structure wasn't quite the way it was supposed to be, and it could be an upgrade. Also, during that time period, as Mr. Dothe will explain, some of the property owners walked away from their units. The proposed development now, as Mr. Dothe will walk you through, goes from 7 units down to 4 units. You're right, there is going to be a subdivided lot. That lot was part of a memorandum of understanding amongst the unit owners as to the rebuild of the structure. Mr. Steigerwald, who is a unit owner, who combined 2 of his units together, is the contiguous property owner along Winchester Avenue. The idea was it was going to be conveyed to him. He was going to keep it basically open in accordance with the current zoning laws with the city, and then ultimately merge that with his existing lot.
Is that still proposed?
That is still proposed, yes. That's
Wait,
part of,
Wait,
that's part
he's
of
an
the
owner of one of the 7 units, or he's an owner on Winchester Avenue?
both.
Oh, okay.
Both. He purchased, owned 2 units, one being the end unit, which is going to be cleared and knocked down. He now owns 2 other units, which he's going to combine. So he'll be the
Are they next to the,
next to his other structure.
no, are they the, you can't say anything until you're
Okay,
sworn
okay.
in.
The vacant lot is next to his structure on Winchester Avenue.
Got it. And where's his other 2 units? Next to the vacant lot?
Part
Or
of the Seven
further down?
Sisters.
Yeah, it's part of the 7 sisters that will now be 4 sisters, so to speak.
Are they the ones that are next to the vacant lot, or are they
Yes.
the one at the, they are?
Yes.
That was my question. Okay.
Um,
They're saying no.
okay.
You can swear him in to clarify if you want.
Okay.
I think what you're asking is
Would-
the end 2 units.
Sorry, I'm
Here-
not dressed for the occasion.
That's
Name and
okay, your name and
address?
address, sir?
My name is Jeffrey Steigerwalt, 9703 Winchester Avenue.
And do you swear affirm the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Essentially, I own 2 of the units. The one end unit,
Next to the vacant land?
currently there is
The
no,
the one closest to,
the corner of Monroe and Winchester,
that's being torn down?
that is the proposed to be torn down. I own the property on Winchester, which is immediately behind the Seven Sisters currently.
But you own 2 of the 7 sisters.
I currently own 2 of the Seven
Where's the
Sisters.
second one in the second?
That is about the 3rd one down in the middle of
Okay,
the
it's
row.
not next to the lot.
In the
Okay.
middle, and not 2 to be combined. It will stay as single.
I misunderstood the question.
That's okay.
So you're combining the empty lot with your house on Winchester Avenue, is your
Yes.
intent?
Correct. So when I
To
came in.
keep it as a landscaped area?
I'm going to add the pavers that I have currently at the property. So when I came in to build my house, I think it was quoted by the board here that I owned the smallest lot in Margate. So to get width and everything else, it will be added to my property so that we can utilize that appropriately. But to Dan's point, the idea is that we're going to keep it in the restrictions of Margate. I mean, obviously, it's an unbuildable lot. I plan to contiguously keep that through and match it to my current driveway today. So it looks correct. It makes the corner more open, and from that standpoint, I think.
But
it just
did you
makes it
say
better.
you're putting your driveway on there, or you're just, your driveway will stay on Winchester Avenue?
My driveway will stay on Winchester Avenue where it currently
Okay.
is, but
All
I
right.
would add that to it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And that was, these ideas were encompassed after many, many meetings of the board on how the property was going to go. With that, I'll ask Mr. Dothe. And if you would, Craig, could you please walk the board through?
It needs to be-
I'm just going to swear him in real quick, Dan. Mr. Dothe, just state your name and business address for the record.
Craig Dothe, architect, 33 North Brighton Avenue, up in Atlantic City.
And do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Take the microphone, please.
The building is in the MF zone, It's an existing 7-unit condominium, and if you're confused right now, you should be, because it's extremely confusing, all the different moves that are being made. But ultimately, we get to I believe, a really nice design solution, so please bear with me. This is, to get through every little piece so that everything's not confusing, it's unfortunately not gonna be as quick as some of the previous applications were. It's a frame 2-story, like basically a first and second floor that sits on top of a raised foundation. The building was originally down about 2 feet off the ground, and this is an extremely low area in Margate. So it floods constantly right there at the corner. And one of the owners, who I've known for many years, have lived in the place for 20 years, and their first floor is about 2 feet above grade, and they've only gone underwater one time, and that was Hurricane Sandy. So their first floor is around the old datum, elevation 9 or 8, something like that. What happens is the unit sizes, these are very small units. They range anywhere from 516 square feet to 534 square feet each. So obviously it's like living on a boat, that doesn't move, hopefully. And so what ends up happening is, this is an example of what I don't think anybody would really want in their neighborhood, in terms of 7 units that are motel style or motel size. So the owners, understand that, and as we go through all the different moves, you'll see how we're able to clean up a lot of those types of issues right now. The first floor habitable is, well, like I said earlier, it's been lifted already, and the first floor habitable has been lifted up to 13.11 feet. That provided adequate walking space underneath of it, as long as, the earth remained at its present level, even with the sidewalk, which goes underwater on any given major storm, like a nor'easter or like a major thunderstorm, because the storm sewers kind of back up, and it's kind of low right in there, so water gets in there, or will be getting in there, even after the building was built, if they finished building it the way they have it. The grade level use right now underneath is, of course, just storage. It's got a single man door. You walk in, and they can put storage in there. During Hurricane Sandy, there were 7 units. All 7 of those units went underwater. The building was determined to be substantially damaged by the building department. So that's why they came in and they had to create a plan to lift the building. Everyone knows substantial damage, meaning 50% of the assessed value of the structure. Or market value. So in order to secure building permits to repair and reoccupy the units, the owners had to band together and elevate the structure. Well, they in fact did that. They hired another architect who prepared a plan, and he came up with a plan that was somewhat similar to what was there previously, because at that point there were still 7 owners who all owned 500 and some square foot units. So the idea was, okay, we'll grab the building, we'll lift it up, and then at that point they'll put a foundation underneath of it. And because the front doors are in the front facing Madison Avenue, and presently are about 2 feet from the property line and will remain 2 feet from the property line, they have to put a catwalk up in the air. Half of it being on the property of the 7 Sisters, and the other half being on the property of Margate, therefore asking for the revocable license. When they did it, they also created a series of stairs, and I thought that was the interesting part, because there's one thing about building over property that is owned by the municipality, but it's kind of another thing to actually put stairs out there, and large, somewhat large stairs as well. But that was the only way to actually gain access to the building after it was lifted up. So this is the area, this is a drawing that was prepared for the previous application that came in front of the board. And this shows the 7 units right here just being lifted. They're allowed to be lifted to this level, level 13 by right. The only funny thing they had about this project versus many other projects that were allowed to be lifted by right is such a small front yard setback required the catwalk to be built there and stairs to be built on the public right-of-way. Therefore, it needed the license, it needed the approval from the board in order to start the process of getting the license approved. So the concept is they built they designed a rather narrow catwalk across here that stuck out over Margate's air rights, but not over the sidewalk, because there's a little bit of area there that had some planting at one time. Then what they did was they put a stair here at the corner and put a stair back here, so that there were 2 means of egress from the catwalk. So it seemed to make sense the way it happened.
Craig, before you move on.
Yes.
Can you explain to the board what the condition of the interior woodwork, et cetera, was in the existing structure?
Yeah, I want to try and keep things in somewhat order. I was hired to take a look at this because what happened is after the lift took place, 2 of the 7 people were able to keep their units. The other 5 lost their units because they're either, if they were living in it permanently, they had to go rent somewhere else and pay a mortgage, which I guess was too much for them, or the condition of the property had deteriorated through the storm so much they couldn't afford to rehab it, so they let it go. It was basically one of those 2 things took place. So 5 out of 7 people lost their property to the bank. At that point, the bank goes through the foreclosure process. They're at that point not even utilizing the facility, not even living in it while the bank is there. So the building starts to deteriorate more and more because no one's living in it. The next thing that happens is 5 out of the 7, like I said, went to foreclosure. It takes a long time for all this to happen. I think we're at the anniversary of Hurricane Sandy. It's the 5th year anniversary, is it?
Just about.
It's a very, very long process. So after the lift, 5 out of 7 people lost their property. The building sits there. So they had it gutted. When they lifted up the wood structure, they also gutted it to expose the wood studs, the back of the sheathing, and that sort of thing. This building wasn't initially built very well. Clem would, if he walked through it, would attest to that, Mike, that sort of thing. What happens is that a lot of the things that they had done many years ago when they built it, in terms of the way they framed the roof rafters, the ceiling joists, things like that, were just sort of pulling the tops of the walls apart down these very, very long walls. Here, the walls were being pulled apart. That, we have repaired that in the past, but there was an extensive amount of that. Also, a lot of rot took place around windows and doors and that sort of thing, so we'd have to replace like basically every other stud. We'd be taking off the sheathing. We'd be doing so much work to this building. It would be basically cost prohibitive. So I made a determination, and I told the clients that I think this building, the wood part, has to come down. But in the meantime, it's a very unusual project, and that is the 2 people that continued to pay their mortgage and the taxes on the property, they were permanent residents. So as such, they were eligible for the REM funds. They applied for the REM funds, and of course, that takes a while, and that's a pretty crazy process also. What ends up happening is they're getting the REM funds now as owners of the property because they're permanent residents to the property. The way the grant was created was for a lift. Then they had to modify the grant to a reconstruction, which was then to remove everything else that was then lifted and in order to build another building on top. We met with the REM people, they're in the process of taking care of that. That's all okay. They're in agreement to modify the grant to allow that to take place. So that's been very good. 2 other people bought into the project when they bought units from the bank. and each of them bought 2 units. So what ended up happening is we ended up going from 7 units down to 4 owners. But Jeff, as he stated earlier, owned 2 separate units that were not contiguous to each other. His concept, and one of the reasons why he bought this front corner, was he owns the house immediately next door. And on Winchester Avenue, traffic is going in this direction. When he backs out of his driveway, the existing building blocks his view of the traffic coming down the street. So what ends up happening is, in his concept, which I think is a very good concept, if he buys this condominium on the corner, he knocks it down and converts it into open space, landscaping, hardscaping, that sort of thing. No buildings. The ordinance wouldn't allow it anyway. So they're not saying they're going to build a building on top of that site. The concept is that it would be wide open space. When he backs out, he would then be able to see traffic coming down. Definitely increases the safety. The second thing that I really like about that whole concept is it creates...
Mr. Dolph, I'm just going to interrupt you real quick. You've shown 3 things. A1, I'm going to call the series of photos. A2, I'll call the prior plan, and now it looks like you have an aerial. We'll call that A3.
Okay. This is the site right here, and you can see how it is the only one within the shot of the satellite that's all the way up to Winchester Avenue. So what we're doing is we're cutting that building back over 16 feet to bring it into conformance with a majority of the properties up and down the road. So when you drive down Winchester Avenue now, it's going to make a major statement in terms of improvement, because as you drive down, you're going to see a lot more open space in that corner. It's not exactly Jeff's idea, like, hey, I want to create space here so when you drive down Winchester Avenue, you know, I have this open space. It's really, again, a safety feature, so when he backs out. His other unit is in the middle. Okay, so what ended up happening is the next 2 units, I'll go through the list because it's really kind of interesting. We got involved in the project, and we had to go out there first and start making some measurements of the existing conditions. And they weren't jiving with the original design drawings for the lift. And that's kind of didn't make sense to us, because the building didn't grow or it didn't shrink, because obviously it was a very old building to begin with. But what had happened is, when the lifting company lifted up the building, they gave it a little twist. And so...
Twist. Yeah.
And so I
Not
say to the
intentional.
client, you know, it's like we live in a world where inches matter. It actually twists about 9 inches. And I honestly didn't know you could do that and still keep it together. But they did that. Then they built the foundation under it now, under where the wood was. So when the approval was originally granted, it was granted for the setbacks that existed before it was lifted. Now, after it was lifted, the setbacks changed a little bit. Where it matters is the revocable license, because the license is for a specific dimension of encroachment over the public right-of-way, which if we just went with what the previous catwalk design was, we would need another foot. So we would be back here, even though, let's say I was hired and we just renovated the building, we'd still be back here for another recommendation to expand the encroachment another foot. So I explained that to Dan, we go over the concepts with it, and that's where we started to get to the point where we said, okay, exactly what are we doing here? Can we rebuild this wood? Yes. Can we go back in front of the board and ask for another foot? Yes. But we have 2 additional problems, and that is, once when this corner came down, we couldn't have the stair over here, because now it would be on somebody else's property. And we certainly wouldn't want the building to stop here and let the stair stick out beyond that. That would look ridiculous. So the concept is that, I mean, you would just normally think we would slide the stair back, but the problem is the front door to the end unit is close enough to the corner, we couldn't have another stair. So now we would have a 4-unit building with a catwalk over the public right-of-way, with a single means of egress. Travel distance of 75 feet for a single means of egress out of 4 units. It just gets crazy from a building perspective, building code requirement. So we basically had to sit there and go, we have to rethink this whole thing. After interviewing the client that has been here for the 20 years, we also realized that that first floor, if we pour the concrete in there to make that storage useful, that's underneath the first floor, is going to go underwater, you know, every major rain. So we realized that now building has been lifted up fine, it's high enough as long as we don't raise that floor. But if we don't raise the floor, that area is just going to attract mold and mildew and bring that smell right up into the house. So I thought, wow, this project is not going to work the way it was originally conceived. So we had to basically throw a hand grenade into the design and restart. So,
Well, Craig, if you would, after meeting with the unit owners and after we went through the memorandum of understanding, I would like you to walk the board through what your proposed plans are and then explain what the variances are that are requested, going over what was pre-existing and what is being requested.
you may go through the floor plans, or I guess first?
Go through the-
That'll explain
yeah,
the,
go through
the yellow.
the floor plans first.
Yeah.
That one will be marked as the first floor, A5.
I think it's A4, but
A4, you're right, A4.
thanks. Floor plans.
Okay, like I said earlier, when the floor was down to 2 feet, what they had was concrete stoops and steps outside in order to gain access to their units that were only 2 feet up off the ground. Those steps were on public right-of-way, but they were at the edge of the sidewalk where there was landscaping on either side. So you'd never even notice that they were on the public right-of-way. I had never noticed it before. So basically what it is when we got away from the catwalk idea, what we did was we said we're going to raise the first floor up to 2 feet at the entry. Now the FEMA guidelines allows you only 2 uses on the first floor, anything that's below the BFE +3, and that's storage or a building entrance. I don't tend to like to build building entrances on the grade floor inside, because if it ever goes underwater, there's damage and you have to take care of it. But we are forced to do it at time to time. When we do it, what we do is we build them out of flood-resistant materials that can go underwater periodically. When that in fact happens, they just need to be cleaned out, and then afterwards, then the place is in good shape again.
Again, Craig, we're talking about non-livable space, correct?
It is definitely not livable space. There's no livable space allowed below the BFE +3.
Okay.
So what we're basically allowed to do down there is garages, storage, and entrance, and that's basically it. So what we did was as earlier stated, Unit 1 was bought by Jeff. He wishes to drop it. So Unit 2 and Unit 3 were bought by the same client. So we had conversation. We said, what are your intentions? And their original intentions were, we'd have 2 separate units. So we said, okay, this is what they will look like. And we kind of came up with a design on what they would look like. At the same time, we went through the rest of the building design. Everybody was at the table, and it worked out really well. We got down to the end, and that client here that lived in the 7th unit had bought the 6th unit with the intention of combining them. These were the people, Janet and Chris, they lived in here for 20 years. So they knew space was their most important thing, because living in such a small area was kind of crazy. So by buying the 2nd unit, we were able to develop a nicer looking piece of architecture, something that you could actually live in and be very comfortable. When I showed that to the client that had bought the other side, they decided, hey, that's what I want. That's perfect. And so what that did was that created a symmetry thing on the building. So it worked out really well. So basically what it is you come in through the front door, we put ceramic tile on the floor, we have a closet down there, and we have like a crawl space storage area. you go up a stair to the first floor. Then when you go up the stair to the first floor, you have your dining room, your living room. You have a nice open kitchen, lots of light coming in through the front with windows, your washers, your dryers, your furnace, hot water heater, and powder room. You go up the stair one more time, you have a
And-
hallway, linen closet, two
This-
bedrooms, and a bathroom and a closet.
This would be marked as A5.
Now, that's the corner unit. So both corners have those two-bedroom units, whereas right now, each of those are efficiencies. Now, on the two inside units, they're each owned by two separate people. So their unit had to be designed differently. What they have is you come up into like basically a wide open foyer, because you can't really come up with anything else to describe it. Then you go through a door here in the back into a stair that gains access to the main living area. This still is not large, so it's still sort of like living in a boat, but it's a better designed boat. You come up the steps, you have a powder room right there, you have a very small living room, and then you have a kitchen. They have a little balcony out front with a door to gain access to it. The trouble with the inside units is the only place they can have windows is in the front, facing Madison Avenue. They're not allowed to have any windows across the back and, of course, on either sides because they're unit demising. So it ends up that every room has to face towards the front, which really adds a little extra interesting aspect to the project. When they go upstairs to their second floor, then they have a bedroom. It's wide open. You just go right up the stairs. It's a bedroom, closets, and a bathroom. Then they go up, they continue going up the stair, and they go up into what I'm calling a loft. It's like a loft attic kind of space. We've learned to start to do this in more and more municipalities because we're trying to get rid of these compressors. You see them around town where it's like you have a sloped roof and then you see somebody build a wedge on there and then they stick the compressor right in there. And how it's regulated, it's 5 feet from the property line so that it controls the noise, and that's good, but it's not very attractive. So the concept, and it's also difficult to get to when you have to repair it, and all mechanical units should have fences around it if somebody is working on the mechanical unit, not fences up against it, but fences behind to protect the guy working on it. So by the time you get done doing these things the way the building code wants to do it, I don't want to get too far into it, but the residential building code, if this was a 1 or 2 family dwelling, there is no requirement to protect the workman that's working on the unit on the roof somehow. But in the building code, there is a requirement to do that, which requires a fence be put in. Because this is 4 units, it is building code, not residential code. Therefore, we're obligated to protect the workmen. So we have to build a flat area up there, and then we have to put 36-inch high railings around it so that it protects the workman when he's working on the compressor. So that's actually a requirement in the building code. We don't even have a choice on that. And so that's why we ended up having to put that rooftop deck there. But we located the rooftop deck in the back of the property, well away from Winchester Avenue, and certainly not even, you can't even see it from Monroe Avenue.
This will be marked as A6
A6 elevations.
The elevations came out like this. What we did was, there's a lot of interesting things architecturally that I think we're doing here that I think are effective. And that is the 4 separate doors, as opposed to the catwalk and stair, give a sense of place for each of these units. It's really upping the game, because this is one of the worst, in my opinion, architecturally, one of the worst condominiums down in Margate. So it's no longer going to be that. We're treating the first floor walls by putting ledger stone on. I put together a sample board because it's a condominium and you got to get everybody's approval for all the finishes. Ledger stone like this.
A7, sample board, go ahead.
Yeah, A7.
Sorry.
That's okay.
That's all right.
Nice warm materials. to offset that stucco in a similar color, sidings in two different contrasting colors, but complement, and then some white trim. What we did architecturally is we stacked a lot of the windows. We created then roof angles like gables above those windows, and then decorated inside those gables to break up the rhythm of the roof to create more of a better sense of space. From a proportion standpoint, it gets larger as you get to the middle and gets smaller as you get to the ends. Stacked windows like this bring in a lot of light into the kitchens because, like I said earlier, these units don't have a lot of windows on the sides and certainly none in the back, that we really have to put a lot of effort into the front to get the light to come back. We did put 2 balconies in the front, and we put that in the space that was the previous license space. We did that because basically in these 2 units in the middle, these units are very small, and it's almost like people are trapped inside of these things, when they're inside of them. It also does one extra thing, and that shelters the doors, the front doors to go into it. We also put roofs over top of the other 2 doors on either side because they don't get the balconies. There's 2 garage doors that are directly underneath the large stacked windows for the 2 end units. So the 2 2-bedroom units right now per design have 2 garages as a part of the design.
And Craig, previously, how much parking was provided for these units?
0 for 7 units. Now we have 2 cars for 4 units. So we're certainly making the parking situation much better. In order to support these porches and these balconies, we're doing these like fins here. We did that on Washington Avenue, right across the street from that commercial building, 101 North, Washington Avenue. And I think it's one of the neat positive aspects of that building. Plus, what it does is it starts to break down that whole wall. It's like if you think about a 2 or 3-story tall by how many feet long, you have to break that up and make it architecturally pleasing. We put glass rails out there, on the balconies and decorative lighting. You can see each and every one of the elevations are still, are thought about and made to look as nice as they can be. Okay.
Before we go into the positive and negative criteria and the variances requested, we have Mr. Schaefer explain the subdivision.
Andy, I just have to swear you in. You just raise your right hand and state your name and business address for the record.
Andrew Schaefer, licensed engineer and planner, 1425 Canfillan Boulevard, Mays Landing, New Jersey.
And do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
For the record, the subdivision plan will be marked as A8.
Correct. A8 subdivision plan.
I told you it's going to be long. Schaefer, if you would, could you walk the board through the subdivision and its purpose? I think a little bit's explained, but Mr. Schaefer is the licensed engineer.
Certainly. The subject of the 2 lots at hand are Mr. Steigerwald's existing lot that was referred to earlier, that is his current location where he lives. The lot that I'm pointing to now, which is lot 24, contains 7 units that have recently been lifted, and I personally was able to determine that the structure's over. Its lifespan is over. The subdivision we're proposing is a 25 by 16 3/4 foot, 418 square foot plus a little bit square foot lot, located right at the intersection of Winchester and Monroe, taken from lot 24. The intention is to eventually, through deed of consolidation, join that to lot 22. It is undersized, and clearly, after hearing Mr. McLaren's letter, requires a plethora of variances.
Right. And again, for the board, there's a memorandum of understanding signed by the condominium association. Part of it was that the condominium association would be subdividing and conveying to Mr. Steigerwald the contiguous property owner that now vacant lot. And for purposes, not that the board has to consider this, but you have a condominium association and having a vacant lot with no structure on it and the maintenance, the tax, it becomes a gigantic nightmare for the board. So for Mr. Steigerwald's purposes and for the board's purposes, the subdivision became the best alternative. And as Mr. Dothay explained, created a better visual environment, which we'll explain when he sums everything up. Before Mr. Schaefer sits, does anybody have questions of Mr. Schaefer?
But just that, we have to make it a condition that the joining of those two lots happens.
It's up to the board. Obviously,
Well, it's just if it doesn't and he sells his house, then we have a lot that nobody takes care of.
That
so-
nobody takes care of, that's correct.
Right.
And it's part of the memorandum of understanding signed by the board before we even started this process.
Right.
After we restarted the process after the second time. Okay. Is that the only question, Mr. Schaefer? Okay.
Beyond that, as we discussed, there would be a deed restriction proposed on the lot to provide no above-ground structures, no buildings of any sort. And aside from that, if they were attempted to do that, it wouldn't be possible. They would have to come back here because the setbacks actually overlap, and there's almost no building area due to setbacks available on the proposed lot 24.01.
That's it. That's all we have. All right. All right.
Yes.
Rich, just to follow up before we begin, I understand you mentioned that it's in the memorandum of law, it's agreed upon, the association wants that 24.01 to go. Is there a way to add a condition that if it's not joined with lot 22, that the condo is now responsible for the maintenance of it? Because we don't want this empty lot
You can
not
make that-
cared for.
You can certainly make that a condition. I can tell you at the board meetings that was one of the major points there. If they were going to take that lot off, take the unit down and subdivide it, the condominium doesn't want to be responsible for the upkeep. Mr. Steigerwald wants to keep it. He has reasons because of his contiguous lot why he wants it. So we can put that as a condition, but I can tell you that it is going to happen.
That's best case.
Okay.
Good.
We'll make that a condition.
Can we also make it a condition that there's no accessory buildings on that area?
They're not permitted.
Impossible.
Hmm?
There's no room for anything.
There's a
Without
shed?
variance.
You're allowed to put a shed there.
No, it's a front
I don't
yard.
think you're allowed to put a shed in the front yard.
No, you're not.
You're right.
Be honest.
Yeah, it's
And
right.
this would be considered two front yards. And that's why they overlap.
Again, a condition of the memorandum of understanding is that a subdivided lot will comply with all the obvious zoning and other requirements for the city of Margate. And now we'll add that additional condition in, that if it isn't conveyed, the condominium association will maintain it.
Thank you, that's great.
Well, not maintain it, it would have to go back to the condominium.
They own it. I mean, if a subdivision's approved tonight, they still own this portion until the owner of lot 22 would purchase it.
Again, the memorandum of understanding requires once the subdivision happens, the MOU requires the association to convey it to Mr. Steigerwald. So that's a condition. I mean, that was a condition before he even came here.
Right, but there's no condition that he join the lots, right?
He still owns it, though.
He owns both.
Well, would that make it automatic?
It may.
It doesn't in the assessor's office,
No, they don't
not
automatically.
unless it's
Consolidated.
consolidated
Right.
by
Okay.
deed.
They have to
Okay.
consolidate it.
I mean, there is something called the doctrine of merger, which gets very tricky, and I don't want to speak for what the assessor may or
Is
may
there any
not
problem
do.
making it a
don't do it.
condition that he has to join it to his lot? Is that?
He's here.
He's here. I don't think that would be a problem. No, on that, you would merge the vacated lot with your lot. That was the whole idea of the MOU. Right. So that's a conversation with the tax assessor. I work a lot with the tax assessor. I'm sure that the tax assessor would require or request the merger of the two lots. Any other questions? All right, we've gone over a lot, so Craig, if you would, I'd like you to walk the board through the existing non-conforming conditions And what is, now is, what is requested as part of this application. Then afterwards, I'd ask you to go through the positive and negative criteria and the special reasons why this application should be granted.
Okay, I'm pointing to my site plan.
A9 site plan.
Thank you, Leo.
And in yellow is the building as we propose to reduce the footprint of it. And what it shows is a front yard setback of 1.42 from on the Monroe side. And that is an existing number after it was lifted. And that is an existing number that we're going to continue to go forward. Where a variance is required for that is because we're building up above the BFE +3, number one, and number two, because we're also building, in addition to that, the upper half floor in the middle of the building. So we're expanding that existing nonconformity by the act of lifting the building higher. The existing side yard setback along Jeff's property right here is 2.04, and that's non-compliant with the ordinance, and it's going to remain that way. Presently, it's on the property line on Winchester Avenue, and it's a very confusing project unless we just sort of like pull back from it and realize that it's almost semantics. We're actually, in one way of looking at it, we're taking 0 front yard setback on Winchester Avenue, and we're making it 16.75 feet. That in itself is a wonderful thing, and we're contributing open space to that area in the one area on the site where additional open space would get the most bang for the buck, because it's right along the corner and right down along Winchester Avenue where most of the car traffic is going. But because we're calling that a separate lot, we don't get the benefit of that when we start to calculate our grass area left over on our specific lot. So we're converting that 0 front yard setback, technically, to a 0.2 foot side yard setback against that property that's going to be right next door with nothing built on it. In reality, you'll never see this property line. But in reality, you'll see the growies and just assume that that's all still part of this ground, which is I think the benefit to both the neighbor here and the benefit of this project as well as the corner itself. Rear yard setback of 27.3 will be maintained to the building, and then the side yard over here is 6.51, and that will also be maintained. Should we go through the list of variances?
Yes, please.
We have a lot of variances. Just for this one subdivided, the larger of the two, I'm going to go over them first, and that is a D variance for density. We have a D variance for FAR.
I want you to explain the density. Is the density actually less or greater as a part of this application? There you go. A10.
Is that the zoning chart?
Yes, it is. And it's the same zoning chart that appears on the drawings that are in front of you.
Just blown up.
So I
People
can
with
see
bad
it.
eyes look.
The density. Okay, sorry about that. The Margate requirement in the MF zone is 1 unit for every 2,200 square feet. Presently, because there's 7 units on that particular piece of property, we have 1 unit for every 446 square feet. So that's considerably different than what the requirement is. And we're able, but by shedding off a number of units, 3 units, And we also technically made the ground smaller by doing the subdivision and making that open space. We were still able to bring the square footage up 50% from what it previously was at 446 to 675. So we were moving the density number to be closer to compliance, still not in compliant, and therefore still is a requirement to have a variance for it. The FAR requirement is 1. It presently is 1.21, and we're moving that number up to 1.9. And again, that's as a result of the subdivision. We're creating this open space, but we don't get the benefit of that open space in our calculation for FAR. Basically, it's the same square footage that was already there. It's very, very close. I have actual numbers if you want to hear them. And that is, we're increasing the square footage of the overall building by 1,002 square feet. Overall, that includes going up on the 3rd floor to provide access and everything else to the building. And it also includes, like, bay windows on the floor plans.
I realize you have to get everything on the record, but don't add anything for our behalf.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, the board has all the variances that are requested. Briefly, and I mean briefly, sorry. Did you consider the special reasons for this application, Mr. Dothay?
I did. Special reasons, obviously, because of the D variance, we have to come up with additional special reasons. And special reasons are for, like, basically public health, safety, morals, general welfare. And if your application promotes those, then that then would become possibly a special reason. So public health and safety, as I discussed earlier, by the act of lifting up the concrete slab another 2 feet to bring it out of the area where it's going to be submerged frequently to a situation where it's only been submerged in 20 years, one time, and still can be cleaned because it's built of flood-resistant materials, does reduce the chance of mold and mildew spreading throughout the house, and therefore is definitely a health safety issue.
How do the cars get in there with that 2-foot raise? Is that a problem?
No. What happens is it's kind of split level. The garage itself is down still at grade
Okay.
and has a ramp,
Okay.
like you park in.
So you've gone over the positive criteria. Mr. Dothay, have you gone over the negative criteria?
Yes.
And in your professional opinion, can the variances be granted without detriment to the surrounding property owners?
Yes. We're building the building smaller footprint than it presently has. Therefore, the site of the 2 lots will actually percolate more rainwater into the ground than presently is there. So drainage is improved. Secondly, the community rating is improved because of the additional elevation that we're providing for the building. Thirdly, obviously, just from an aesthetic standpoint, aesthetically, it's a nice enhancement to what presently is there. Let me find those other
The bar's not high, but we like the project. And Craig, in your professional opinion, can the variances be granted without substantially affecting the intent and purposes of the zoning laws of the city of Margate?
Yes, I do.
No further questions, unless the board has any questions.
Any questions from the board?
Rich, I
Yeah.
have a question.
Oh, thanks.
Sorry. Is it going to be the shingled siding, the whole that you're
No.
showing us?
They were just my samples. What I have is clapboard for the majority of it, and then at the bay windows, putting the cedar shake, that CertainTeed cedar shake shingle.
Okay.
From a floodplain management perspective, I really like the idea of raising that interior entryway space higher. I think that's a very good thing for the city and for the owners of the property.
Thank you. As an architect, it's like you're allowed to put that entry down at grade.
Right.
And it's crazy because that entry, just, the air just flows, right up to throughout the whole house. It doesn't make any sense to me, so I've so rarely been able to do it, properly, and I think this one we were able to do properly. Thank you.
Mr. Dulce, do you have the exact density figures that you're proposing and required? Just when we get to framing the motion. I mean, you need a D variance for density. Roger may have them too.
Basically, required is 222,200 square feet per unit. And they're going down to 670 square feet per unit.
670?
676.
Got it.
And it presently is 446.
Correct.
Anything else from the board? Anyone from the audience have questions, comments? You want to come forward, state your name and address, and be sworn in, please?
My name is Dr. Amber Capola. I live at 9704 Winchester Avenue.
I'm sorry, can you just say your name a little slow?
Dr. Amber Capola.
Capola, got you.
Thank you.
And do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
I just have a couple questions. I was wondering, parking in that area is already an issue, and even though you're cutting it from 7 units down to 4, you were saying that ideally you would want 10 spaces, parking spaces. And I mean, if you're only offering 4, that's still...
2.
Oh, 2.
No,
Sorry.
you would need 8 spaces. They would need 8 spaces, and they're providing 2 spaces.
Providing 2. Currently, as of right, we have 7 units up with 0 parking grandfathered in, so we're creating a better parking environment.
By 2 spaces.
Oh, I'm sorry, you were right, it was 10.
I need you to use the microphones, please.
Roger, presently, as the units they're very small, they're just efficiencies.
Correct.
Is that 1.5 cars per parking? Or parking per unit?
It still qualifies as a townhome, 1.8, so
Okay, so you round that up? Or do you just
you actually
calculate?
multiply that by 7. 1.8, 7, 12.6, so it'd be 13.
Okay, so presently, the requirement for the 7 units is 13 cars parking. With the new configuration of the 2 two-bedroom units and the other ones being efficiencies, the requirement pulls down to 10, and we're providing 2, so that's why we're at 8.
That's still not even close to adequate parking. Just sort of stating the obvious.
Could you speak into the microphone? I can't hear you.
I was just saying that's still only 2 parking spaces,
Mhm.
which is fairly inadequate. All right,
Thank you.
It's a new project.
Your name and address, please.
My name is Sally K. Brayman. I live on 114 North Monroe Avenue for also approximately 20 years.
Okay, and do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. I have lived on that street for, as I said, almost 20 years. The people that are primary residents there have been for 5 years out of their home, and it has been left in disarray. The house is a blight. It attracts whatever, rodents, vagrants, garbage. The solution that Mr. Dauthier comes up with, no one would go through that effort. The homeowner of 20 years, besides Mr. Dauthier, to go through such, gymnastics, basically, to get this to work. And also, I'm sure there's probably quite a bit of expense that's been spent over these 5 years. Even to actually say, no, knock it down, and somebody do it, do something else. It's gonna take a time again to go through all this again. It'll constantly be a blight. This is a positive solution, and seeing a very, very positive solution, something as minor as parking in an area that already has, and has always had. I mean, I do not have a driveway. I park my car for several blocks away in the summertime. And so do many of the other people, and so do many of their other guests because of the density of the parking in that area. So that's always been existing. Not to mention the fact that the people that did live there, they also parked in front of their homes, all 7 of them. Now you're decreasing the density, so just having 2 spots is, and you don't have as much space. When you have a 5-unit and you're only putting in 2 spots and they have company, well, we still have a parking problem, So Margate has a parking problem, and I would propose that in somewhere in the future that they would choose to purchase one of these larger lots and make some public parking. But in the long run, it sounds wonderful, and it will finally dissolve one of the problems. It is actually talking in the solution rather than the problem, which is a really nice thing. And to quote one of my dear friends, Lisa Gottlieb, one of the things she said at the last meeting, actually I believe it was a relative, Lynn, I just recognized the voice from days back when we kind of built up this community in the heyday of the casinos. She said, aesthetics, they really do matter. And it's about time that things just move along, and get those aesthetics done, because it's a problematic street, and it always will be, because it's full of lots of cut up, back in the day when it was all sand here and people were just building without any kind of codes or variances or anything. This is one of those streets that's like that, and this is going to be coming up on a regular basis, where there's going to have to be creative ideas and some sort of bend with, working things through and looking at things in a future perspective, like upstairs balconies on the ocean and some balconies, on the 3rd floor, and look at other communities that have started to turn upside down their properties and are looking at that and maximizing views and things of that sort. Because if you are on a 3rd floor, you probably can see the ocean anywhere on the island. So I believe that just the idea of being here, these people are sacrificing space. And, it's actually not sacrificing space, because there's people like me.
Please stay closer to the microphone.
People like me are getting older, and also even my son's generation, he's 27, are saying they don't want the burden, and they don't want the space, the cost of larger spaces. So building some more reasonable sized spaces, that also solves another problem. More reasonable sized spaces, and also affects our tax base, because it's more encouraging for people with small families, 1 child, or a single parent to move in and put their children into the school system, which also helps that. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
But I'm all for it. Thank you.
Thank you. One more, please come up.
I'm just going to step in. Do I need to be
No.
sworn in again? Okay, I'm going to borrow the mic. Is this on? Okay. So I just want to make 2 very clarifying points, because you asked me a direct question, so I'm also going to help out with something here as well. You asked about the drainage. On my house, when I built the property, the entire perimeter has an underground drainage system that runs to the street. So not only did Craig do a great job with pushing it forward, the back in between the houses has a full drainage system already in it. So it will slope to the street, so it will not flood in the back, and when it does flood, it'll quickly vacate. The other clarifying point, I just want to make sure there is no deed restriction once this is contiguous. Why it was set up this way, I'm not quite sure. That's a discussion within itself, but I can tell you the intent is 1 lot, this to be 22, 30, okay? So lot 22, 331. The other thing is, if you look at my property here, we don't have a driveway. The benefit, okay, there is no driveway. I mean, it's 5 feet unless you use the 3 feet here. The intent was to widen it and use this so that we could actually park and meet the requirements of Margate. By adding this portion of the lot, that actually does put our property in conformity with Margate and all the standards you look for and get the off-street parking and everything. So I wanted to be that clear because you did ask me the direct question. I just wanted to make sure you understood that.
Thank you.
But from the point of this all does drain out to the street. It puts everything together properly. So going forward, it works. That's all.
Thank you. You're not intending to put the driveway there now?
Not right. Well, the other thing is at this current moment, the reason why is we've agreed to leave this lot open because this is where the staging for all the development would be. There is no other area for the building material or anything to be there. So at this point, this would remain open until such time that this is occupied because I still have a unit here. I want this to be built properly. I don't want the streets blocked off in any way or shape or form, but we're open to use that lot in order to build the property, if that helps.
When do you intend the condo to convey, if it's granted, the new lot to you?
Well, that's a discussion that we can have, and I know in Margate, I forget the amount of time it is, but it's a subdivision, so at which time I could take it once it's occupied. Once it's fully occupied, because again, you might be getting into insurances and different things like that. If this stays with the condominium until it's fully built and occupied and the UNOs are provided, I'm more than happy to do that and then subdivide it from that point, if that works for you.
If you get subdivision approval,
180 days.
you have 180 days.
Right.
Upon perfecting the subdivision, is the condo going to convey it to Mr. Steigerwalt? Is that the intent, or I'm just trying to figure out how we frame these things.
I think it would be upon the approval of the subdivision, within 180 days, or after the 180 days, it'll be transferred from the condominium association to Mr. Steigerwalt with the understanding that it'll be left open for staging until the construction is done. Does that make sense, Leo?
It'll be left open.
Well, they're going to tear it down.
And when you acquire the property, are you suggesting that you can then potentially put something on it?
No, I just want to use some of this place to park because we have no driveway. Other than that, it's open.
Right, but so you're not proposing a deed restriction?
There is no deed restriction because then it affects the entire, I'm in real estate, so it would affect the entire property. any type
Well, that
of
was
deed
my
restriction.
concern. If
Yeah,
you deed
so
restrict,
that's
then
why
you
I don't
require
want a
it.
deed restriction.
It was put in the MOU that it would go along with the zoning and statute for the area of the city of Margate. It's an unbuildable lot right now.
Okay. If you want to speak, we're still in the public portion.
Well, you better let them know now.
Wait a minute.
I might want to come back. Hold on a second.
Okay.
You'll get your chance.
Give him back the mic.
I mean, you are aware that if you put a driveway on that corner piece, it has to go to Monroe Avenue?
Well, that is the discussion. I could just widen my space here to get in, and it would be next to my house.
No.
I would have to go on the corner here, because the
You
idea.
need a variance to have another driveway on Winchester Avenue.
Okay,
And you'll also have a lot coverage issue if you were going to combine these lots. So you might be back here just for that, just to let you know ahead of time before you stop my office and I send you back here.
right, well, and in discussions, the idea, or I could have looked to rebuild the unit as is, in terms of leaving that property there.
Or maybe we can work out something where you have the concrete block with the grass.
Sure, absolutely. We'll talk about it.
I think Roger's point is there's potential unknowns in the
Right, but
future.
I was asked a
and-
direct question. I just wanted to make
Yep.
sure that I did not in any way, shape, or form misrepresent what the question was.
Right.
And that was it.
And then while you have the microphone, you own lot 22. Unless
Correct.
I'm wrong, lot 22 is not technically part of the application.
No,
The
sir.
applicant is the condominium, correct?
Correct.
That is correct.
So to put a condition in there that if the subdivision approval is granted, and then upon perfecting the subdivision, lot 2401 is going to be conveyed to Mr. Steigerwalt, that's okay. But then to put a condition that Mr. Steigerwald is then going to consolidate the two lots, I think we at least need some representation, or at least for purposes of enforcement of that condition, that you're willing to make yourself and your property part of this application.
Yeah, and that's why it wasn't at the beginning, because then we would have had to open up that property as well instead of just a lot. It was thought that we would just, it would be an understanding that we would convey it that way.
Okay.
Does that make
As long as
sense?
you're making that representation, that as a condition, you're making your property part of the application to the extent that for whatever reason you don't consolidate the lots, it's a condition of approval and we can enforce it against you if necessary.
I understand.
Okay.
Yes. And you understand where I'm coming from, correct? With everything that I just spoke about?
I do.
Yes.
Yes.
And you've read the engineer's report for the subdivision?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There's still some waivers and stuff. We're kind of in the public, but I don't know if you want to. At some point, we have to
Yeah.
get to the Remington and Vernick report, go through the waivers. Your name? and
Cynthia
address.
Balone, and I'm representing my mother, Nancy, who is the other owner that remained.
I unfortunately have to swear in. Your name, Cynthia?
Balone. Yes.
Balone.
Bellone.
And your address?
1731 Route 9. Oh, my mother's
Yeah, you can
address?
say yours, and then when I swear you in, you can say how you represent your mother and all that.
1731 Route 9, Ocean View, New Jersey.
And do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Good.
So I just have a quick question I wanted to ask the city of Margate. In the event that this whole situation transpires and that the unit that Mr. Steigerwald bought and is connecting to the back unit, can you tell me that at any point, will there be a car there? Placed there? Can
wait.
he park his car in that area?
In the corner, empty lot?
Yes. I feel that it would be a negative impact in the event that my mother wanted to sell her unit if that space was used for his car parked there.
Which unit does your mother have?
She's in the middle.
In the
She's
middle.
Unit
She's
D.
not contingent, she's in the middle. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this
Just
would
a
be,
question. Just a question to get clear on.
no, this would be a separate lot. It has no impact on that. He's entitled to use that as a driveway if he gets approval, if he follows the,
So he can park his car there
not yet.
if he gets the approval.
Right.
Which is not tonight. He would have to come back for a separate approval. It would be, at which time you could object. Anyone else from the public? Public portion is closed. You want to discuss the waivers or whatever?
I think they need to, does Andy want to address the engineer's report, or does Dan want to?
We sent a letter to Mr. Manos, to Leo, basically with regard to the waivers requested. Number one, for the map size. We believe an adequate map size was submitted as part of the plan. I think Exhibit 810, to the extent it didn't meet the requirements of the engineer, we requested a waiver. The key map, again, was submitted, again, as part of 810. To the extent that the key map was not big enough, we would ask a waiver. The name and address of the subdivided parcel, we've gone over that at length, so I don't think a waiver is needed. The name and address of the joining property owners has subsequently been provided. The location of buildings within 200 feet, again, a waiver would be requested for that. The location of the parking, that was provided pursuant to the plans, as was the location, the trees and shrubbery that would be planted. The location of sewer, water, and other utilities would remain the same. The lighting and photometric, a waiver was requested. The signage was not applicable. The soil erosion, a waiver was requested based on the size of the project. The floodplain delineation has been gone over at length, which was the whole start of this process many years ago. And we just went over a copy, or spoke about the potential protective covenants that would go along with the subdivided lot being transferred.
So you'll comply with that?
Yes.
I would suggest, Andy, we can make this 24 by 36. I mean, you're going to need signature blocks and all that, right?
Most certainly. We'll agree to make it the full-size map.
So item number 1, they will comply. Item 2 will be on that map. And you comply with the map filing law? Yeah. Yeah, I think you need the larger size with it. All the section, and section B has to be on that map too, so
We agree. I'll provide that.
they'll comply.
That's it.
Waiting on that?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is
So,
that you snoring?
so which waivers does that leave us that they're requesting? By number?
They'll waive all applicable waivable items, and they'll comply with the items that are required for the map filing law and the subdivision as requested by the engineer. I don't think we need to go each item by item.
Okay, so they're, I'm sorry, say it again then?
They're going to comply with everything to make the subdivision map whole and as required by MLUL. Some of these items that they are requesting to be waived should be waived. They're not really applicable.
Right, okay. All right. Do we need to discuss anything if they perfect the subdivision prior to lopping off that one portion as far as posting a bond or anything like that?
Well, they're going to have to, because it's a site plan, they have to
Regardless,
post an engineer's
okay.
estimate and
And that's all in there?
a bond.
You okay, Dan, with everything in the Remington Vernick report and Rogers report as
I am.
far as conditions and recommendations?
I am.
Unless we modify them tonight, obviously.
Right. I am.
I just want to mention that I've met with some of the owners, including Mr. Steigerwald, for the last 2 years on this, and they really wanted to do this the best way they could with what they were dealt with. I mean, you can't take a personal hardship as your reasoning, but they've really tried to make this the best project they could. And I told them from day one, they had to come back. If they couldn't, if they tear down the structure, it's not a lift anymore. It's a new structure. They have to come in front of the board. So I don't know how many hours we met with them, but what you see is what you get, and I'm actually impressed with what we see here. And the site, even if they were to comply with parking, the site's not large enough. And you would lose all on-street parking. So to me, it's a compromise. And it's a hardship. The size and shape, it is a lot to comply with parking. Just want to put my 2 cents in. It's about 5 cents by now.
Are we ready to frame a motion?
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
All right, I'll give this a shot here. We need a motion for minor subdivision approval to create new lot 24.01. Minor site plan approval on lot 24. In terms of the variances, I'll start with a D variance. It's a D variance relief for density where 2,200 square feet is required per unit, and they are proposing 676 square feet per unit. And then the following C variances: on lot 24, a lot area variance.
You need the other D variance for FAR. One is required, 1.9 is proposed.
Floor area ratio?
Yes.
What were those numbers again? I'm sorry.
1.0 is required, 1.9 is applied for.
Okay. And the following C variances, I'll start with lot 24. Lot area of 2,706.25 square feet, where 4,400 square feet is required. Front yard setback along Monroe Avenue to the porch/deck of 0, where 23.29 is the prevailing setback. There's actually an encroachment there, but we can only grant 0. Front yard setback along Monroe Avenue to the building of 1.42 feet, 1.42 feet, where 29.21 feet is the required prevailing setback. A rear yard setback of 1.9 feet, where 20 feet is required. A side yard setback on the left side of 0.2 feet, where 8 feet is required. A side yard setback on the right side of 6.4 feet, where 8 feet is required. Front steps, setback to the front steps of 0 feet, where 2 feet is required. Again, that is, we can only grant 0, but there's an encroachment there. Building coverage of 57.45%, where 45% is permitted. A front yard landscaping area of 8%, where 60% is required. Third floor decks are requested on 2 of the units, where third floor decks are not permitted. Parking variance of to permit 2 spaces, where 10 spaces are required. And the density we already went over, that's the D variance. And then as to lot 24.01, a lot area variance of, this is the newly created lot of 418.75 square feet, where 4,400 square feet are required, and a lot width variance of 25 feet, where 40 feet is required. The waivers were as discussed on the record and set forth in the Remington and Vernick report dated September 29th, 2017. The following conditions will apply for those 2 encroachments that I mentioned. The applicant will be required to obtain the encroachment licenses from the city of Margate. Upon perfecting the subdivision, the condominium will convey lot 24.01 to the owner of lot 22, which is Mr. Jeffrey Steigerwalt. Upon that conveyance, Mr. Steigerwalt will consolidate lot 22 and the newly created lot 24.01 into one lot. And then there's the conditions in both the Remington Vernington report and Mr. McLaurin's report dated October 23rd, 2017, that the applicant has agreed to, unless modified on the record tonight during the course of the hearing. And I think that's what we need a motion for. And since there's a D variance involved, we require 5 out of 7 for the application to pass. She'll play back the tape. And where is Rem?
She's done voting.
Okay, good enough.
Motion? Craig? Mike?
Clem Wozleski.
Well, on a positive note, this project is certainly architecturally cut well above what we usually see, especially given such a challenge to the architect. Other than that, in all my time on this board, I don't recall any project requiring so many variances. I don't want to, I don't want to go into each one of them, but for some, the setback variances all around are extreme. The 4 units are being put on a piece of property that cannot even support 2. 10 parking spaces are required, and only 2 are provided. And some street parking, in addition, is lost with the driveway accesses to the garage. I realize there are a lot of heavy financial considerations and other such involved here, but those aren't something that this board takes into account. So as I understand the municipal land use law, leaves me no choice really but to vote no on the application.
That was a no?
Yes.
Okay. Rich Patterson?
I don't know if this is something we consider or not, but I did ask Roger what could be done if the building was torn down, and it's pretty much nothing. Seeing the design and the positive impact that this is going to have on the neighborhood, not only from what was there, but the design of the new building, I don't see a negative impact on the neighborhood, and I vote yes.
Mike Cristaldi?
We've been looking at this for 5 years, and if we turn this down, we'd be looking at something for another 5 years until we come up with some kind of an idiotic solution, where I think this is a really good solution. And Mr. Dothe's gymnastics on a roof, you need to see that. I think it's a benefit for the neighborhood being this ugly this long, and it brings our CRS up. As Roger was saying, I vote yes.
Margaret Gubernati?
I haven't been on the board quite as long as Clem, but I have not
Almost.
seen, no, and I have not seen as many variances as are requested, including the D variance. And as Craig said when he was started, it is confusing. There's a lot here. I think it's a compromise. I think it is a benefit to the health and safety of what has existed there for these many years. I can appreciate all the work that's gone into this project, as Roger said as well. I think that the benefits it's certainly more positive and outweigh the negatives. I think it's aesthetically a great improvement. I do understand the parking is an issue, but parking is an issue in Margate. I think we are creating a better parking environment with this. I vote in favor of the application.
Craig Palmisano?
I sympathize with the homeowners who have been out of their house for 5 years. I was out of my house for 4 months due to Sandy, and I went through a house raising with my own son. So I know what some of you people have gone through, and it's not fun. It's not fun. I can't believe how you've managed to hold together this long and gotten from 7 to 4 units and to work with other people on this. Also, it's been an eyesore for a long time, The setbacks are existing. The front lot changing the landscape, you add more landscape to the front. There are 25-foot lots. It is a 25-foot lot. You're putting small bedrooms, two-bedroom units in, which I like. I hate the 4 and 5 and 6-bedroom places. And it's also going to be flood compliant. So I have to agree with this and I approve the application.
Despina Hess?
That's you.
I guess I'll address the D variance first. For density, as to the special reasons, I don't see an undue hardship. However, I believe that the proposed project does carry out several purposes of zoning, promotion of zoning purposes, general welfare. Basically, by subdividing that corner lot, you're creating better sight, open corner, more light, air, and space. Basically, for those reasons, I believe that the fact that we are now going from 7 units to 4 units, although the numbers, and I believe you mentioned this in your presentation, collectively you're creating more open space, but it's not being reflected in your numbers because you're losing that valuation in your calculations because it's not being counted towards your area. So it's not necessarily calculated in there, but it's, the neighborhood's gonna still gain from that benefit. Vote in favor of the D variance. As to the C variances that you're requesting, just some factual basis, I'll combine them all together, but for the decks, because that's some point of issue generally, I believe although they're not permitted, the fact that you're creating them to give light to those interior units, I think it's also helping not just the homeowners, but the neighborhood in general, because you're adding dimension to an otherwise flat building. So for that specific factual purpose, I think that it's a great addition to the property. Other than that, just to address the parking concerns, I believe they're credible concerns, but I didn't hear any negative feedback as to the property really other than that, and I believe that by, again, subdividing that unit, you're creating more greenery, and the numbers are actually improving in many areas where your variants are being requested. We're going from 0 spaces to 2 spaces, and other than that, as far as the individual units, again, I forget the exact number, it was like 446 to 676 or something like that. Again, it's an improvement, even though it's still not up to where it should be, it's still an improvement, and again, less people, less units, better aesthetic building for the neighborhood. So for all those reasons, I vote in favor.
Mike Richmond?
The property as it stands now is a blight to the neighborhood, it's a health hazard, and it's a potential danger if we had another big storm. And I'll take Mr. Dothay's testimony as, you know, as the way the building is built now, it's really an unsafe structure. So, I'm not the only other thing that basically could be done is to tear the thing down, and I don't know if that's a good thing for the neighborhood, because then the people that live in the neighborhood couldn't have a house. I know there was some concerns about the parking, but the parking does actually get a little better. There's fewer units and there is 2 spaces allowed. So I'm going to vote in favor of the project.
The application passes 6-1.
I would like to thank the board and Ms. Casey for indulging in this application for all this time. It's been a lot, but I was a board member myself, so I appreciate your time and patience. Thank you.
Dan, please
Stand.
come sign these.
We have other business. Sit down. Yeah, we need a 5-minute break. We're back in session. Roger, please. Sit.
Where's Leah?
Roger, would you please explain what we're doing?
Yes, where's the agenda? As some of you may be aware, the condition of the master plan was to allow height zones A and B, where it's currently 28 feet, to be 30 feet. with certain conditions. And of course, we're waiting and waiting and waiting. I've had enough, so I just did it. With the help
Why?
of Mike and Rich. No, I mean,
Why did you do it?
Because every application that's coming in is asking for a height variance.
And we thank you for that, Roger.
Sure. So basically, the rule of thumb for any variance in ordinance change is the governing body is presented an ordinance. They recommend it to the board for consistency with the master plan. I wrote a brief summary saying it is consistent with the master plan. I just want to highlight, I'm not going to read the whole consistency report, but I just want to say that I added height zone B to this also.
What is height zone B?
28 foot.
Where is it?
It's around the bayfront properties,
Okay.
waterfront. On page 2, it says the municipal land use law provides the planning board with 35 days from the referral date to prepare, review, adopt, and transmit the consistency report regarding ordinance 17-2017 to the City Board of Commissioners. NJS 40:55D-26 describes the planning board's responsibility regarding the master plan consistency review as follows. The planning board shall make and transmit to the governing body within 35 days after referral report recommendations concerning these inconsistencies and any other matters as the board deems appropriate. What I added was ordinance 17-2017 advances the following objectives from the Margate City Master Plan, the one that this board adopted. Item number 1, to review the city's history, document progress towards prior goals and objectives, and develop plans and strategies for how the city can continue to adapt and thrive in the future. I think this ordinance complies with that. It meets that, is consistent with that goal. Item number 2, from prior master plans, address concerns about bulk and mass that arose after adoption of the 2004 plan. Prior planning goals were renewed, revised, abandoned where appropriate. Again, I think this ordinance change is consistent with with the master plan. And the final item, upon review of the master plan efforts, it became evident that items that were priorities of prior plans are no longer concerns, and items that are significant concerns now are not mentioned in prior planning efforts. This can be expected to some degree when reviewing prior master plan efforts in any community. However, the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy has shifted the discussion and priorities of many coastal communities. The steps that a coastal community such as Margate must take to ensure its long-term existence has been taken for granted until recently. Again, I've carefully reviewed and analyzed ordinance 17-2017 and the master plan. Based on this review, it is my professional opinion that ordinance 17-2017 is consistent with the Margate City Master Plan. Respectfully submitted by yours truly.
Does everybody understand how we changed this height variance? Before, when we had a 512 pitch and a 28-foot height limit, you could actually have side walls 23 feet. We've dropped that down to 20 feet or below what the side walls can be. Even though we've gone higher, we brought the side walls down. But also, to give the architects more leeway, we've made a minimum 512 pitch, maximum 1412 pitch, which means they can have some different slopes in the roof. They can't bring the 512 all the way out so it's just barely sticking in. It has to be at least 14. But they can, which gives them more headroom and more space where they'll have 8-foot walls instead of 5-foot walls in the third floor. They're still limited to the 50% on the third floor and the 15% for the dormers, but they'll have more headroom, more usable space. They'll also have more attic space up there, which they can use. And again, I think, as that woman said beautifully, aesthetics are important, and there will be more variables or variations in the designs of these properties, and the architects will have more freedom and still get good looking.
Did we change the 15% rule for the stairwell being included in the 50% rule?
I don't know if that's addressed.
That was not part of this, no.
That's not part of this.
So you understand?
When Rich explained it, that's awesome, how the sidewalls drop.
So
I think
now
that's
you can
great.
have like kind of like a Dutch colonial kind of look.
It's gonna be.
And again, I had an epiphany how to fix this. Instead of changing the height map and all the variances and the ordinances, I just made it another exemption for height. So you leave the map in place, and where it was height zone A and B, you have to condition, the conditions are this.
Is that all covered in these features?
Yes.
What you were just reading?
Because I forgot.
The way you did that, Roger, perfect, because the side walls are lower.
Joint effort.
We're getting rid of the zones then.
No, the zones remain.
What's their height coverage?
Everything's 30.
Right now, we have two different zones.
Right,
No, there's three zones.
3 zones, A, B, and C, right.
So now we're saying it's straight across the board, it's 20 to the top height.
No.
Just in A and B.
In height zone C, where 30 was always allowed, it's business as usual.
Okay.
If you want 30 feet in height zone A and B, you have to meet these conditions.
You were only addressing A and B.
If you don't want to do this, you're stuck at 28.
Okay,
Oh, that's great.
yeah, that makes it easier.
Right.
Real good.
Then the appearance still stays. low.
Somebody might want to,
It really gives you.
this is a two-story home.
Should be pretty.
Yeah.
Great.
You get with the stairwells, you're not worried about the elevators. What you're trying to
Find it.
control what are nice.
I think what I mentioned before the meeting, of defining that 50% better than it is now.
Well, the 50%,
Architecture, I'm starting to see it. They're leaving open spaces like the stair and saying, oh, that doesn't count because there's no floor. It should count whether there's.
well, you
floor or
have to
not.
talk to him because he's the one that makes the interpretations of what's 50% or not. I thought the floor area space had to be 50% of the second area floor area
Right, but-
space.
Yeah, but now.
The past interpretation
Listen
is,
to what Clem just said.
But how would
Floor area, there is no floors.
Right, I didn't think
So
that
how's
counted.
become 50%?
50%,
If you want, if somebody wanted to argue,
Well, that part with no floor can get as big as they want. They can end up having the third floor the same size as.
yeah, but they still have to comply with the dormer requirements.
Giant foyer, stairwell,
Right.
atrium, call it what you want. Stairwell.
it'd be useless feet.
It should be floor level, regardless of whether there's a floor.
I think we need a better definition for dormer area too.
well, again, that's
Because-
not addressed in this, what we're voting on right now, but we do need to discuss it, but that's,
Don't you figure the dormer area in that third floor? That area of the dormers?
no, it's just two separate calculations. The floor area is 50%, then the dormers are 15% of that 50%. That's two separate calculations.
Not 15% more.
No, it's 15% of the 50%,
You could have 4 dormers in there.
as long as it's 15% or less of the 50% area of the third floor. It's included within the 50%.
Leo and I are going to do this some more in Ventnor. So it's pretty interesting. And we're actually have some pretty good regulations that we're passing there in Ventnor. If you
Well-
want a dormer, you got to step inside that building envelope.
Well, let them figure it out, and then
Right.
you let us know what they did.
Right. I'm figuring it
Okay,
out.
So do we need to,
You need to take action, yes, you need to present this to the governing body that,
no, what do we do? Do we make a motion to,
Yes.
to what?
10%.
You make the motion. Are we ready for a motion? Sure. No, we don't know what the motion is. He's telling us what the motion is. I gave it to Glenn.
you're recommending to the governing body that it is consistent with the master plan. The board finds it is consistent with the master plan.
Right, so we just need a motion to send a report and recommendation to the governing body that the proposed ordinance changes are consistent with the master plan and that we are recommending that they be adopted.
I'll make that motion.
Clem,
I'll second.
Mike, all in favor? Opposed? Unanimous.
We need a motion to adjourn?
One more item.
Wait.
Oh, okay.
Just new business is a,
Is that what this is? Is this new business?
it's new old business. Wait a minute.
These are the ones you told me to take.
Hey, they close it.
Basically, we're going to address the pool equipment and the clearance around the pool at the next commissioner meeting. So we're going to get another consistency report.
Area, how much,
Right, it's already done.
Yeah.
We've already agreed to it,
Right.
but it has to go to the governing body. I just want to let you know that the next planning board meeting, we have to do the same thing we did tonight.
Okay.
No, we can't.
It's gotta start.
The governing body has to recommend it to us.
Isn't that 6 and 3? I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor, aye, all opposed.
It's 6 and, you better tell the realtors what it is.
it's 6 and 3.
Oh my God, it's freezing.
I went to open house and they like it.
Yeah, it is.
But it's cold here. I'm like, oh, no, you can't. Please stay up for that.
But as far as giving a definition,
So intrusion through a roof, right, yeah. It's kind of still open, but at least we don't have any definition. None.
Good night, guys.
Right, because
in fact, there was only one in that thing that I disagreed with.
Yeah, you can go out either way, I don't care.
I'll follow you. My car is like that.
We'll be there.
I'll text somebody.
All righty.
I haven't seen it for
We got the
years
chef
and
there
years.
for you tonight.
Oh, the,
Flour sandwiches and,
Not that he eats fish, but as long as he's there.
well, we got the wings. We
That's
still
all.
always have wings.
well, that's all right. Always got high cholesterol. That's good. Nah, my cholesterol's under control.
You don't have to deal with being a secretary anymore.
Yes, please. Which ones do I need revised plans for? Not Andover. Andover gets trashed.
What?
What don't I need there?
I don't have to deal with Colleen.
Do
Maybe
you
a
know
little.
she came in to apologize to me
Oh, really?
and thanked me for all I've done for her? And even Dan
Yeah.
just said